card for a parking problem.
And 4 in your 23.
Yeah, 4 in a 28. One truck when you're ready.
Go ahead.
One truck, white Lincoln X-ray 985 should come back up and
So you had 2000. Patrick Spalding.
10-4. I think it's put a little note in something like that. I'm going to be leaving a note on his vehicle so they can remove it.
Rockingham 505. 505 enter vandalism case for Athens. Complainant soon to be slashed her tires and has made threatening comments to her. She's concerned he might return.
Yeah, forgive that's a 32.
10-4. You're assigned to a vandalism case in Athens. Can you copy the 505?
Yeah, 4. 3 in Depot Street. Truck away at 35.
7435. 10-4.
Can you go 643 again?
143.
You go with that 43 you had. I didn't hear any, but I had jump looks like we do.
10-4, I just wanted to know if you should be put back 76 to Cabana Circle or to the subject's address.
Yeah, I'll be 23 back on that town property case, and I'll be 76 to the Williams Road address to see if I can find the owner.
10-4. 449 1120.
Now 449 1121, thank you.
10-4.
Code 4. 4.
Alright, we have 535.
Yeah, that was a great college.
535.
Should be. You guys know if our woman is plugged into a house. I'll slide up that way.
Caller is now been able to close the front door. He's now pounding on the door, trying to get it down. He's now applied to a longer here, got tie-dye shirt on, and number 21 is also.
We have separation. In or out. All right, guys, happy Friday. Good to be here. So there's so much to go over now, things that have happened even today, obviously yesterday in the hearing. And I didn't have time today. I had other stuff going on to put together the order of things or even just remind myself of some of the things we had to go through. So I will later on be leaning on chat to look for the things that you guys want me to discuss. But obviously, a big thing today was there was a motion by the state to go after the messages between Karen and David Yannetti for the few days surrounding John's murder. Now, these are attorney-client privilege messages. Wow, right? Like the attorney-client privilege that's like the 11th commandment. That goes back to the Old Testament, right? I mean, that's pretty sacred stuff. Is there any way to actually get attorney-client privileges entered into evidence? Well, Hank Brennan makes the argument. I'm not a lawyer. I couldn't tell you if it was good enough, and I'm, a little bit suspicious as to whether that could work. But there is a point to be made that Karen, by discussing those messages with the documentary people, waived her attorney-client privilege. So I'd love to see what the lawyers want to say. Is Heather here? Heather, do you have any thoughts on this? I don't know if Heather's here today. Heather's the YCT lawyer. I don't know if we have any other lawyers here. And actually, I'm going to go over the last couple of articles by Anonymous Mass lawyer, too. And so I should have messaged him today to see what he thinks on this. I did notice, interestingly, I was getting some scans earlier in the day, and while I was waiting, I looked at Twitter, and I saw that the lawyer who has a very big following, and who is a smart guy, he's definitely a lawyer, he leans pretty strong. He definitely panders to the free Karen Reed crowd. Let's put it that way. But he's someone that if you watch him, he will try to be objective on legal issues when he can. Although he understands who his crowd is. So when he's going to say something that they don't like, he always apologizes ahead of time. He'll say, "I'm sorry, you guys, but I'm going to have to say this." So he's kind of pandering to that crowd. At the same time, he can be pretty good. He's a smart guy. He knows what he's doing. So I'm not sure. So he interestingly had posted, he goes, "Listen," he goes, "I haven't had time to research this or think about this in much depth, but I'm not reading from his quote here, so I'm just going on memory." But he basically said that it seems to me that she did in fact waive her attorney-client privilege through her participation in that documentary. So that's all. To me, it's always interesting when someone from the other side agrees. Whenever somebody takes a position that is the opposite of what you would normally expect or what they would want to take, you have to give it more credence. That said, I still am. We'll go over this motion in a moment. Not in a moment. I think I got a couple of things I want to do first. But, that said, I still would be surprised if the judge does this because it will have to be airtight for Judge Cannoni. The precedent on this would have to be so thoroughly established so that she is 100% on solid ground in allowing attorney-client privilege messages to be brought into discovery. And that seems pretty unlikely to me. I mean, if you want to get reversed on appeal, this seems like one of those things that you might do, and no judge wants to be reversed on appeal. So that's their biggest fear, is being reversed. So they're going to that's why they always seem like they're leaning towards the defense. They're not really. I think judges try to be fair, but they're very concerned with appeals. Appeals only come from the defense. The prosecution doesn't really appeal. Because of double jeopardy. So we got a lot to go over. And there was so much that happened yesterday in the hearing. I took some notes, but the motions they were going through were so fast and furious that it became tedious even to take down notes for a lot of the stuff. But there were some big moments yesterday. So it'd be great if anybody wants to send me clips on any of these, so I don't have to go through and hunt them. But we had Hank Brennan, or maybe we can go. See, I didn't mark them, so I don't know how it would take too long to find them by going back to the video. But I'd love to go back and listen again to what Hank was saying about the new new information that they have, the new data. This would be from the chip off, and it sounds like they may have some new information from looking at the temperature logs on John's phone. So he's saying that they know exactly what time John got out of the car, and it was 12:30. I don't know if they know it to the second, but he said 12:30, and that's huge, especially once we find out how they know that. So though he didn't really come out and say it, he seems to be saying that they got what we hoped they would get from the new chip off data, and that is timestamps. At the very least, the timestamps from what happened during the triggered events, but possibly more. And because that information is accessible in the vehicle, they just weren't able to get the first time because it's complicated and it involves, it's not just the black box and that kind of stuff, but it involves where the data is stored in the vehicle. And some of that was in conjunction with the entertainment system. And the entertainment system needed a software upgrade. They were not able to get that for the first trial. In fact, they waited to do the chip off until very late, until December of 2023, hoping that that upgrade would be available. It wasn't, but then it was after the first trial. So they were able to do a second chip off in December of 2024, this past December. All right. So before we even get to that, what I want to do is when I put this on, I won't be able to see chat, but please let me know if Kate's here. I don't know what Kate's doing tonight. I talked to her earlier today briefly, and she said, I'm just about to release a new video, but I didn't ask her what it was on. So I'm going to play some of that video for you here. And while that's going on, I'll organize some of the things that we can go over later. I don't want to play the whole video because I don't have Kate's permission to do that. So I don't want to be unfair to her. So what we'll do is we'll play, several minutes of it here. And because Kate's videos are always not only very informative, but very entertaining and very well done. And then what you'll have to do, though, is give her the view. So to see the end of the video, go watch her video at Mass Hole Mafia, right? I always forget if it's Mass Hole Troll. I think of so it's Mass Hole Mafia. So I'm going to play a little bit of that now. And then when you want to see the end of it, just go to Kate's channel, Mass Hole Mafia, and watch the end of it. Don't watch it till after my show, but I'm kidding. All right, let's pull this up.
What is a grifter? The word gets thrown around a lot, but at its core, a grifter manipulates emotions, distorts facts, and exploits situations for personal gain, often at the expense of truth and integrity. Nowhere is this more evident than in the so-called Free Karen Read movement, a spectacle built entirely on deception. Karen Read, accused of killing her boyfriend John O'Keefe, hasn't just denied responsibility. She's spun an elaborate web of conspiracy theories to rally support.
I won't interrupt again. I just want to say, I love the old newspaper graphic theme in the back. That's great editing. Like, you see the title here, Melanie Little? It looks like an old newspaper graphic. I love that. That's really well done.
Far from a pursuit of justice, this movement is a masterclass in grifting, driven by opportunists chasing clout, money, and influence. And the biggest grifter of them all? Karen Read herself. Karen Read has said a lot of straight-up delusional things about herself.
This is what my purpose is in my life. It wasn't working at Fidelity. It wasn't teaching a night class at Bentley. Those jobs are replaceable. Someone else is doing the job. Someone else is teaching. Someone else is the dean at Bentley now that my father's gone. And we're here to shed light on the corruption that exists in this state. I hope I meet all of you one day. And I don't know you, but I love you. And you're brave. And you would have protested the Vietnam War and ended it. This is the modern equivalent to that.
No way. Wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
Thank you.
Her entire defense, her so-called social justice movement, her public support, and even her fundraising efforts are built on fraud. Some of her deception has been convincing, even fooling skeptics like me at times. But as time goes on, the depth of her lies becomes more apparent.
If John was beaten up and attacked in that house, who did it?
Just because you didn't do it.
We know who did it, Steve. We know.
Okay, you're aware he was beaten up by Brian Cobb Albert. We're all in on the same joke, right? My tail end was cracked and John was pulverized.
We don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know. And it's not for us to know. Somebody other than Karen is responsible for that, for the killing of John.
The only people who are actually convinced that she is factually innocent are the most slack-jawed mental patients in the greater New England area.
He chose Karen whether she liked it or not. God is behind Karen. God will prevail.
I have history with police. I have a past with drugs.
Because my nose looks bad.
How about
Free Karen Reed. Free Karen Reed. I'm at San Diego Airport. Free Karen Reed.
So it's not just here. There's a multiple layer of stuff that Aiden has opened up and exposed.
These people are the easiest targets. Karen preys on lonely, attention-starved outcasts she'd never associate with publicly. It's insidious. She exploits them for money and media buzz, using that attention to lure in more followers, keeping the cycle and her relevance alive. Karen Reed's defense.
It's worth reminding people too, I'm sure Kate probably does, but Karen didn't invite any of these people. Now, like the people that they're showing all the time, like just let's rewind for a second there. You know, these guys here, they've been out rain, snow, thunderstorms, 90-degree heat. They've been out for every hearing, every trial day, everything to support Karen Reed. They were not invited to the fundraiser. None of them were. So Kate is exactly right that Karen wouldn't want to be caught dead hanging out with these people.
Publicly. It's insidious. She exploits them for money and media buzz, using that attention to lure in more followers, keeping the cycle and her relevance alive. Karen Reed's defense isn't just about winning hearts and feeble minds and avoiding a conviction. It's about making money. She has publicly raised over $740,000, though the actual amount is unclear. Nick and Jenna Rocco's illegal raffles alone have funneled at least $100,000 directly into her Venmo, bypassing the official fundraiser total. There is no transparency in exactly how much money is directly going to Karen. Her legal fund, managed by attorney Alan Jackson's firm, claims to cover legal and expert fees. But Reed had already paid her attorneys $200,000 for David Yannetti and $250,000 for Jackson, the latter through a personal loan, before fundraising even began. Her known expert witnesses cost under $24,000, and even if her additional experts charged $12,000 each, that still only accounts for around $60,000. With attorney fees already covered, that leaves a massive gap. Where's the rest of the money going? To make things even more perplexing, Karen Reed told Vanity Fair magazine that she was $5 million in legal fee debt. However, Alan Jackson himself later shot down this claim, insisting that her legal team is working for her out of principle and not for money.
It's important to know, not to interrupt, Ted, but it's important to know that although the attorney time involved is in the multi-million-dollar range, probably $6 million between Mr. Yannetti, myself, Ms. Little, other lawyers who have worked on the case, other individuals, investigators, et cetera. Most of us, all of the lawyers, are not getting paid that. We have not taken that money. We're not going to take that money. We're not taking the money because she doesn't have the money. And the reason that David Yannetti is doing this, the reason that I'm doing this, the reason that Liza Little is doing this, the reason that Marty Weinberg and Bob Alessi and others are doing this is because it's the right thing to do.
Karen Reed's ever-changing claims about her financial struggles don't seem to match reality. Despite being unemployed, Her lifestyle has only upgraded since her murder trial began. Once a regular at low-key local spots like C.F. McCarthy's and the Hillside Pub, she's now staying in luxury seaport hotels, dining at Boston's most upscale restaurants, and flaunting designer outfits, hardly the life of someone drowning in debt. All the while, her devoted supporters, and even her own brother, are pleading for public donations to fund her so-called legal defense.
We need all of your energy, your financial contributions. We need all of your energies, all of your giving, but we need all of it and then some.
While Karen indulges in fine dining, expensive outfits, and luxury accommodations, her brother urges supporters to sacrifice. The contrast couldn't be more glaring or suspicious. What's even shadier about the financial situation is that Karen Reed, through her attorneys no less, claims to be financially crippled by indefinite unemployment, mounting legal fees, and exorbitant medical bills for a laundry list of health conditions, none of which seem to hinder her high alcohol consumption.
There's also a practical side to this, which gets into the financial issues, Your Honor, and I'm almost concluding my argument here. You've seen my client's medical expenses in the past. You've been aware of her loss of income. You've also been aware of the numerous experts, witnesses, investigators we've had to retain. We're now approaching a trial date, which we will request today. Those expenses continue to mount and indeed will skyrocket. She cannot afford to skimp on these experts. The stakes are too high. She needs every dollar she can to keep going, and $80,000 is a lot of money that would go a long way toward supporting her defense.
Or maybe the Reeds just have a very different definition of financially crippled than the people they rely on, who reportedly aren't just skipping fine dining, but cutting back on food altogether for her benefit.
It's the ones where you know somebody's doing without. They're cutting back on a grocery order, or they're cutting back on going from a large pizza to a small pizza on Saturday, something.
Karen's excuses for living like a millionaire on other people's dime are flimsy at best.
How many nights do you think that you've stayed at a hotel since this legal saga began?
Since the legal saga began, trial was every bit of 10 weeks, and then a week or so leading up to it. So that's 100 days.
Okay, let's pause it there just because it's great and I want to finish it. I just don't want to pilfer Kate's content. She worked really hard on this. It's like people that have never edited video before. Now, Kate has a million times more talent than me, and also she enjoys video editing. I don't like doing it, but it's a lot of work just to collect and gather each one of these clips and then put them together in a sequence that makes sense, that matches your narration, and to create all these really, she does a fantastic job with putting in these graphics and these backgrounds and these transitions. It's just tremendous. It must have taken her a couple of weeks worth of work, at least, of intense work to put this together. So everybody should appreciate that the work that she's done. So go over and check out Mass Hole Mafia to see the rest of this. And sometimes Kate gets available on Fridays at 9. She's welcome to come on and talk about it with me. But go over to Mass Hole Mafia and give her a view. The other thing I might play, let me see if I can find this clip. So I don't usually do this, but I was on Court TV last night, and my sister and my mom were not happy with me. They thought I was a little mean to Nick, but I wasn't meaning to be mean. I want to see if I can find this clip. I don't know exactly where it is, so give me a moment. And I wasn't meaning to be mean to him at all.
Change at all.
And Nick, what was your reaction to knowing that the defense isn't going to get those multiple weeks they want? Is that going to change anything for them?
I think they're going to be ready to go regardless. I'd have to agree. I think if they do start paneling the jury on April 1st, as long as the trial wouldn't start before the federal decision was out, I guess there really necessarily wouldn't be an issue with that. They're going into this and they're going to defend her on 3 charges. If they happen to only have to defend her on 1 charge, better for them. So their strategy might have to change a little bit, but ultimately, I think it's fair if you do start on April 1st, because it's going to take weeks. I mean, there's no way it's going to take a couple days for this to happen. They're going to go through probably over 1,000 people before they find their jury.
And Kevin, why do you think that is? Why is this assumption that it's going to be much longer than perhaps the first trial?
Okay, I'm going to skip over this answer. I think it's the second segment where, but I'll answer, but I will deal with this topic though. So what Alan Jackson has said, and apparently he's speaking correctly, that if the trial is underway and the U.S. Attorney's Office orders some kind of remedial action based on the appeal, the habeas corpus appeal by Karen's team. So whether that involves dropping one of the charges, like if the circuit court said, yes, you need to drop one of these charges, or even if they asked, the judge needs to call back and impanel the jury to voir dire them and find out if they voted on this. If they order that kind of an action, they don't start over the trial that's going underway now. What would happen is, according to Alan Jackson, and I think it's probably true, I haven't researched it, I'm not a lawyer, is that the entire case would be dismissed. Because you don't get to start over a trial that's already started. And as Nick hinted at here, but as Alan Jackson explained more thoroughly, what the case precedent is that it would jeopardize not only their legal strategy for the case, but even their strategy for how they impanel the jury. So, because each side has a right to an amount, I forget the amount, if it's 6 or 9 or something, where of peremptory exclusions, where they could just, any juror that doesn't fit the profile of what they think will be helpful for them, they can just say, no, you're off. And during that impaneling process. So that strategy that the defense uses, which might in theory change if the charges change. So if in the middle of the trial, or even after the jury is sworn in, all of a sudden the feds come down with a ruling that says you need to drop murder 2, the third charge. If they're correct, the result will be not that the trial will continue, but they'll just drop the third charge. The result will be dismissing the entire case against Karen. And that's obviously a disastrous result. And so I don't know, is the judge rolling the dice here in allowing this to continue? So I think what seems to be the case is that the judge has decided, because of everything involved with the massive number of jurors that had to be summoned for this special situation here, that it really was not possible to postpone this trial, or it would cause great difficulty. So what she said was, and I'm sure she didn't get this idea from me, but I actually proposed this idea on this channel last week, that you start the jury selection on April 1st, but just slow walk it. Take as long as you need, because you're not swearing in the jurors yet. You're just impaneling them at this point. And so, for instance, last time they were expecting that this jury selection process might take a week. It actually ended up going much quicker. But these things, in theory, could take weeks. So let's say you're a juror that gets selected on day 1 of jury impanelment. Well, you don't have to come into court the next day. You don't have to come into court until the trial begins, which could be a week later. Or in theory, could be even longer. And I think that's what they're going with here, is that, so the defense asked for a postponement till April 25th. So the judge said, well, we're going to start the jury selection process, but we're going to try to not swear in the jury until the feds decide. There's still some risk in that, because what if the feds don't decide in April? Now, I wonder if the judge had some back channel information from the federal court that they would be able to decide within a certain amount of time. I don't know. Up in the air still is the federal circuit court could offer for the parties to come in and make oral arguments. At this point, they're just reviewing the written argument. I don't know what the chances of that are. The SJC allowed oral arguments, and you remember seeing that. That's when Attorney Weinberg for the defense went in, and he's thought to be he is known to be a brilliant lawyer. So does that mean that there's a good chance that the circuit court would do the same thing? Or does the circuit court factor in that the SJC has already ruled? I don't know. I don't know the answer to these things. All right, so let's get to, let me get past my, whatever my stupid answer was there. This is, oh, I forget her name, but she fills in for Vinny. Sometimes she does a good job. You know, these people, sometimes when we're watching, you get a little bit of the cameras rolling. Let's see if this is it. No. All right. So he went to Wayne first, then Joe, and then Nick. So you see a little bit behind the scenes. I'll see Vinny practicing to open up for the introduction. With Julie Grant, you would see her walking in, and then she does her presentation from a standing position. But so she's got to stand in the exact spot where the cameras are, but also she wants to get her body in a certain position that she's comfortable in. And she works like you see, it's almost like an actor getting ready to do their lines, right? And so this lady here seemed to come in almost late. I was already logged in when it looked like she got there late. I'm sure she wasn't. I'm sure she was just in another room or something. But she's pretty cool. But you can see, you got to be up to go on TV. And you could see her trying to kind of go through that fire herself up process and combination of fire yourself up and calm yourself down. These people that do these shows that go on every night. I don't mean like a YouTube show. I mean like a real TV show like this. Boy, there is a degree of professionalism that goes on there that you develop over time, and it's really hard work. I think too of like watching. I sometimes will watch I like watching videos of individuals in life, and they good guys or bad guys, historical figures that rose from the bottom to extremely high positions of power or fame or something like that. And sometimes they're evil figures like Hitler or Stalin or something like that, but they're not always. So one of the ones that I've become fascinated with in recent years and before the movie from this last summer, and he was someone that I was never interested in before. I wasn't really interested in his music. But the whole phenomena of Elvis, right? And so Elvis didn't do a lot of interviews. He wasn't allowed to by his manager, Colonel Parker. But no matter how long he had been a performer, a big problem for Elvis before every concert was nerves. And there are some videos showing him behind the stage. And, the guys around here, part of their job was to keep him relaxed or, so I can totally see it too with people like Vinny or this young woman here to have that right mental approach to go on the air. It's so difficult. Anyway, sorry, I digress. Let me go to, she's going to ask Nick a question here, and then Nick's going to mention me, and then I'm going to bring it back to him.
Tell us about their relationship. How close are they?
I mean, I have no idea how close they are. It's pretty known that
the question, I missed it. The question was how close she's asking Nick how close was Turtleboy to Karen?
They've talked, they've communicated, which again is not a crime. I don't think Karen Reed has told Turtleboy specifically to go and intimidate or harass witnesses.
Now he says this here, but so for people to think that I was being mean to bring it up when it comes to my segment, he brought it up.
I know Kevin has said before, I know all about this, and I've seen this. I've never seen screenshots of anything. I've heard talk, but again, unless it...
And he's heard talk from Turtleboy, not from some random thing.
There's proof of it. It's never happened. So they have his cell phones. I'm sure they've looked through them already. They already came back with a no true bill. So I don't understand what they think they're going to find in the future of this. So.
And I want to talk about this documentary because it came up today. The special prosecutor mentioned the documentary for investigation discovery that Karen Reed participated in. So it's a series called A Body in the Snow, the trial of Karen Reed. And it's been the subject of arguments. It was 2 days ago being talked about because Prosecutor Brennan said that he learned things he never knew before based on what Karen Reed said in this series. And today he brought up that there's proof in this series that there were communications with Turtleboy. Take a listen.
I do not have the video, but she was recently on an air broadcast on a documentary last night, the night before, and the night before. There are admissions that she was, in fact, providing information to Mr. Kearney. And what is notable is that she specifically reflects upon the consequence of Mr. Kearney's actions, which she helped fuel by providing this information and identifying the witnesses in her case. I do have a clip, if the court is interested, because it gives great depth and understanding to the intentions of the party in sharing this information. I have a clip available. If the court wants to hear it, I can play it for the court.
I don't think that's necessary.
Now, I wanted to see the clip, Kevin. I've seen parts of the series. I have not seen the entire thing. I think it's up to 5 parts now. Didn't notice what he's referencing. I'm wondering if you've seen it. Maybe some other members of our panel have.
All right, so just to explain how this goes in this situation here. So sometimes they give us on Court TV an email about 4 o'clock saying what the general topics are going to be, but that's not the same as saying they're telling us what the question is. This time they didn't even give us that kind of an email. So you're on TV. I don't know how many people watch this show nationally, but it's not like a podcast. You don't get to have a long answer. Your answer is supposed to be about a minute. And when they ask you a question that it happened to be the other night when I was on with Vinny, he asked me a question that I don't know what the hell. It reminded me of back in school when I'd be spacing out thinking about something else, and the teacher would ask me a question, and it would be halfway through the question that I realized they were talking to me. And, you got to play it off, right? So that happened the other night with Vinny. It was like halfway through the question, I didn't know what he asked me. It was halfway through, I started realizing that I'm not paying attention. So I was like, oh shit, I got to pay attention. And so I knew the general topic, but I still didn't quite understand what he asked me. So what am I going to do? You're on TV. I can't say, oh, can you repeat the question, Vinny? So I wasn't sure what to do. So I didn't want to pass, so I went into an answer that was related to the topic, but missed the point of the question. And I know at least my sister watching was very astute, and she's like, Kevin didn't understand the question, or he changed the topic or something like that. And Vinny rolled with it too. Like I said, he's a professional. He's not going to sit there and show me up and say, "Oh, that wasn't the question, Kevin." He didn't do that. So I think the answer I came up with was hopefully still somewhat interesting. So here, I didn't when she referenced that clip, I wasn't sure what clip she was talking about. She doesn't know obviously either because she said she didn't see it. I'm not sure which clip Brennan was talking about. I watched the whole series, and I'm thinking, is he talking about the one when they show or seem to show Karen video of Allie McCabe being questioned and brought to tears on the stand? And Karen says, I'm paraphrasing it because I don't remember it exactly, but she says basically, I don't care. This doesn't move me because I don't look at these people as witnesses. I look at them as though they should have been suspects. And so she didn't care. That could have been the clip. I'm still not 100% sure which clip Hank Brennan wanted to show in court. So it's hard to put that on my plate when he didn't show the clip and he didn't describe it. So I'm not sure. So let's just go with my answer on this.
Seen this, and whether or not you think that it is something that could be used by the prosecution.
Yeah, I'm not sure which clip that he's referencing. I do know what Nick was talking about earlier was if you go back to the start of the trial, early May, at that time, and Nick can speak directly to this, and the admin chats from the Turtleboy Facebook group, which Nick was and his wife are administrators of, showed that Turtleboy himself was saying that he had information that he was threatening to take to the state police, showing that Karen helped him coordinate his targeting of the witnesses. Now, we don't know if he was making that up, if it was just bluster. He was upset at the time because Karen wasn't inviting him to sit in court. She had Nick take his place. So he was upset about this. So he was making this claim. Now, whether or not that information is actually on his phone, I don't know. But Turtleboy himself said it was, and Nick can speak to that. He knows that to be the case. He was there for those conversations.
Nick, we've only.
So before we play Nick's response, and you could see his face there, he wasn't happy about me asking this question. But the reason he's not happy is because he knows every word that I'm saying is true. He was in that chat admin. We've gone over that chat months ago, that chat admin stuff on that conversation that was leaked out by a couple of whistleblowers from inside that group. It's fair to call them whistleblowers, believe me. And these are people that their conscience, they're good people. They believed in Karen's innocence, but over time, I don't even know if it was so much the case that I don't even know if it was so much the case that they first began to believe that the conspiracy theory didn't make sense so much as seeing this behavior by Turtleboy and by Karen made them realize what kind of people they were really dealing with. Not good people. It's just not good people. And I don't mean that in some kind of a black and white judgmental way. And so the world consists of good people and bad people. The world consists of people that are mixed. And most people are pretty mixed, and most people have a lot of decency in them, and then also have some parts of them where they can be selfish and immoral. But there are people that truly are kind of good. I've met them. And there are people that are bad, and there's no question. I don't. Let's not even talk about Karen, because she didn't seek the spotlight here. So let's just leave her aside for the moment. But Turtleboy is a guy who is seeking the spotlight and just does not give a shit who he hurts, as long as it provides entertainment content for his channel. That's all he cares about. And anybody that can't see that, like our guy Rainey, who comes in here once a time, if you can't see that, I don't really know what to say. I mean, because it's so obvious, and it's obvious every day of the week for Turtleboy. That's who he is. If people that can't recognize that, I don't really understand that. Maybe you just don't want to. But we can also. So all right. So this is what a large part of the early hearing was yesterday, where Hank Brennan, and he did win this, got the right to get the messages that were, so Turtleboy's phones were seized going back. Well, there was a couple of processes of that, but initially in the fall of 2023, and then again a second around, I think, when he was arrested for violation in end of December of 2023, and a few weeks after that, they got Karen's phones too. And that there's been a long, interminably long process of trying to sort through that phone. It's been in taint team and argued about by Turtleboy's lawyers, and I don't understand why the criminal process in this state is so effed up all the time, every case. I don't get it. It's at the point where the registry of motor vehicles makes the court system in this state. The registry, by contrast, the registry looks better. They look more efficient. I mean, it's stunning how nobody seems to have their shit together. It's just, when you watch it, you can't help thinking, why would you ever trust the court system again? Why would the McCabe's or the Alberts or the O'Keefes ever trust this court system again? Any part of it? I mean, it's so broken down at this point in terms of efficiency, in terms of just not knowing what they're doing. Lawyers not knowing what they're doing everywhere you look. Stunning to me. But anyways, Judge Cosgrove, now he's actually the special prosecutor now in the Turtleboy case. He has access to those phones, although the taint team has taken it. But he must have. Hank Brennan had reason to believe that there's evidence on those phones that would be useful in his case. And the angle that he's going with is that it shows consciousness of guilt. Now I put in the thumbnail picture for this, which AI generated as always. I put Clark Kent with his Superman uniform in the court. And it's because Hank kind of has that Clark Kent way about him, right? And he's got the glasses and the mild manner, but can turn it on when he wants to. But I think it's now just looking at the facial reactions to David Yannetti yesterday in court. I think David Yannetti is realizing maybe Superman, because he's just steamrolling these guys. But I think it's a mistake for us to think that every motion is designed on its face to get what we think, because I think there is a larger game at foot. And there's also just an incredible thoroughness to explore every angle. So getting Turtleboy's communications relevant to Karen, is there likely to be anything in that? I'm skeptical, because Karen, as we've all known, going back from day one, she only communicates, even with people that I know, with Signal. It's an encryption app. And so she's been aware since day one that she's a murder defendant, and she doesn't want to put anything in writing that will come back to haunt her. So the first thing is, and I'm sure Josh Levy knew this too, you talk to people on a phone call, there's no documented proof. So that's mostly what she does. But in addition, there was a point, and especially when you wanted to send material, like if you want to send discovery material, illegal for her to send that out, non-public material that's not been made public, but that is in discovery. She's sending that out to Turtleboy. Well, she's not using email, so she's using Signal. Now, Signal's an encryption app that disappears after a certain amount. Your messages disappear after a certain amount of time. You could change the setting on it. I've never used it, but so there's probably a default setting of like 30 minutes. So in the case of, for instance, initially what was going on was Karen was using Natalie as a go-between. Natalie is a college friend of Karen's. And so Natalie lives in California. She is probably unhappy about this, but she is on the prosecution witness list now. I don't know if they'll call her. But so she would get messages over Signal from Karen to be sent to Turtle. Now you can imagine how stressful this must be, though, because that message that Karen sends to her is going to disappear within whatever the setting is. So say 30 minutes. So you want to make sure you get that message complete, right? That you're supposed to send, or whatever it is you're supposed to send. So what Natalie would do, and it was not for any duplicitous reasons, was screenshot the messages. Because that you take a quick screenshot. Now, when you want to send this message to Turtleboy, you could just use the screenshot. Whether you're sending the screenshot, I don't know if she actually sent a screenshot copy to Turtleboy. Probably not. She probably just looked at the screenshot and then typed in the message that Karen wanted. But I don't know. So, given that's the case, is Turtleboy likely to have any messages from Karen? Well, unless there's two ways. One would be if the state police have some way of decrypting encrypted messages, and I don't know that they can. I don't even know if the FBI or the CIA can. I really don't know. So while it's possible, I think that's probably a little bit unlikely. I haven't heard any discussion of that in court. And, the whole reason for encryption software is so it's not that easy to do that. So I don't think the state police can probably get encrypted messages. But if Turtleboy was making screenshots of those messages, that's what they can get. Now, I hope that that's included. I'm sure Hank Brennan he's not the kind of guy he's very thorough. So I'm sure he's aware of that. And so so the judge ruled that Hank was allowed to get those messages, but along certain very narrowly defined parameters. Maybe I'll go over the motion later for you. But did that parameters include photos, which is where a screenshot would be, right? It would be in an image in your image files. Hopefully that they are smart enough to understand that if there's anything incriminating, any incriminating messages that Turtleboy has would be from a screenshot that he took. Now, did he take those screenshots? If you know anything at all about Turtleboy, if you have any street smarts at all, if you have any sense of how these kind of human beings are, you know that he did. All right. Because from Turtleboy's point of view, every single person in his life, no matter how close he is to him, even the pit bull, every single person is eventually an enemy, is potentially an enemy, and with a good chance of eventually being an enemy. Hold on one second. Okay. So Natalie just pasted messages. So in any case, but we know there are screenshots though, because that's how those messages ended up in with Natalie's information. So if you know anything at all about Turtleboy, he knows that eventually everybody's going to turn on him because he turns on them. He's not truly loyal to any other human being. So anybody that's in his orbit, he's collecting dirt on you. He wants to have leverage over you. And I know people going back 10 years, I'm not going to give away any details, but I've seen the messages that he was doing this to someone that was supporting him in the media 10 years ago and turned on her for no reason, just that he wanted to control her and had been digging up dirt on her. And this was someone who was an ally. So that's how he is. So Nick Rocco understands this too. Turtleboy has his sights and has had his sights on Nick and his wife for a long time. And that's what we went over in that chat, Edmund. He had his sights on them last summer. Now, Nick is not naive. Neither I don't know his wife, but you can tell the way she handled herself in that admin, she's not naive either. They know that Turtleboy secretly behind the scenes wants to take them down. But they have stayed on message, and you got to respect him for that. I don't respect his positions on this case, and I don't respect the way he just kind of casually attacks innocent people with accusations of murder and murder cover-up when there's no evidence. I consider that to be irresponsible. But outside of that, I can respect a lot of things, and I can respect he and his wife. They're goal-oriented, and to them, the goal is to help Karen. And they were willing. They know what Turtleboy is, but they know that it's more useful for them to stay united. And so that's why he was able to get up on the stage at that fundraiser a couple months ago and be friendly. And Turtleboy even at that time put out kind of a post apologizing to Nick. It's not genuine. It's not genuine. Because right now, whatever dirt Turtleboy has managed to collect on Nick and his wife, he has that somewhere. He's ready to deploy it at any chance he gets. Nick knows this. He's not stupid. But what can you do, right? So as we went over that admin chat last year, what we saw, and I knew this firsthand because Nick had told me this in person in Dedham when we were there for Court TV. So at the beginning of the trial, Turtleboy was not, instead of Turtleboy being selected to go on Court TV, it was Nick. So this screen we're looking at right here, in Nick's place, it drives Turtleboy crazy to look on that screen and see Nick there. He wants to see himself there. He felt he was entitled to that position. I mean, that's truly, entitled is the perfect word. He felt that position belonged to him. And he also felt at the time he didn't have the media pass, so the only way he could get into that court was if one of the families invited him. Obviously, the O'Keefes aren't going to. But they instead invited Nick. And Turtleboy was seething. And he was set out to destroy Nick and Jenna. Now, in that moment, and this was May 3rd last year, he threatened to go to the state police with evidence that Karen Reed was behind much of the worst, the most egregious witness intimidation stuff that he did, including giving her the addresses. I'm sorry, giving him the addresses. She was involved with, in fact, when Turtleboy famously, one of the worst things he did, one of the first things was when he went to Jen McCabe's, the lacrosse game that her daughter was playing in. So I think it was high school lacrosse or youth lacrosse. And he goes in the stand with the camera crew and harasses Jen, but weirdly, when he was there, he kept saying Did you think you could outsmart Karen Reed? Did you think you could outsmart Karen Reed? It was a really strange thing to say, right? Like, why would anybody? That's not even. Not only is it not journalistic, it's just really strange. And he said in this admin thing that it was actually Karen who sent that message to Jen through Turtleboy. She knew he was going that day. For all we know, I know he didn't say this, but for all we know, she's the one, or her sources are the one that told Turtleboy that lacrosse game was going on there. But again, I don't know that. Let me just take a drink. So it seemed weird, right? Now, is it possible that Turtleboy was making that up because he was so mad at Karen because Karen had invited Nick into court, and because Nick was on court TV, was he so mad that he was willing to destroy everybody? This is what you have to understand. If you're friends with Turtleboy, dude, this is what this guy will do to you on just on an impulse. If he's mad at you at something, if you didn't answer his email fast enough, he might turn on you tomorrow. I mean, this is what he is, right? It's not a good human, not a real human being. And I'm not saying that with hatred. I don't say that as a no more than I would hate, watching an Animal Kingdom video and a cobra bites somebody. I don't hate the cobra. That's what the cobra is. That's how it was born. I don't hate the cobra. I don't hate Turtleboy. Turtleboy, that's what he is. He was born with a different brain. And if you can't recognize it, there are people like that in the world. If you don't recognize it, you're risking becoming a victim to them. So did he really have that evidence that any evidence that he could take to Lieutenant Tully that would show that Karen was directly involved with the targeting of the witnesses? Well, we don't know, right? But interestingly, in the documentary, Karen looks at the camera and she's talking about Jen McCabe. Oh, hold on a second. Just lost my light. She looks at the camera, and she uses the word "you." She doesn't say "she." She says, "Either I'm going down or you are." How bizarre, right? She has turned this trial into a personal battle between her and Jen McCabe. Well, that's very bizarre, but that is how psychopaths can think too. And that's also, more importantly, very consistent with the idea of her sending Turtleboy with a message. Did you think you could outsmart Karen Reed? That's very, like, that message is very weird, but it's actually it's confirmed in a lot of ways by Karen saying that. So that's confirmed. Does that mean it's also confirmed that Turtleboy has actual evidence? We just don't know. And he may have evidence, and the state possibly didn't find it. He might have screenshots on a thumbnail somewhere. Maybe you remember that scene from Pulp Fiction with Christopher Walken. And do you guys remember Pulp Fiction? I guess I'm getting kind of old, where I remember when all the young kids were talking about Pulp Fiction. But there's that great scene when Christopher Walken, when he returns the watch that he or his dad, he's turned the watch to the son during the Vietnam War. His father had died as a prisoner of war, but he had kept that watch, which was an heirloom from the grandfather, stored it up his anal cavity for years. And that was the point of that story. So, I wonder if, similar to that scene, if you were to attempt to search up Young Jelly, you might find a thumb drive, right? I don't know. Did Young Jelly show up? Did Turtleboy show up last year when he was on the run at Young Jelly's doorstep and say, "I need you to store this in the same way that they did in Pulp Fiction"? So maybe the state police should get a search warrant for that. I'm kidding, Mike Jelly. I'm kidding. If you get this clip, I'm just joking, brother. Have a sense of humor. I wished you congratulations on your grandson's birth. I'm not trying to start a war with you. I'm just having a little fun. All right. So let's go back to Nick's answer here. So I got long-winded there, probably, but So as I said, I put it in Nick. I said, so you and your wife you were in those Facebook admin chats. I showed him on the channel. In fact, I think eventually later, some of that stuff Kate played as an audio too. She had an audio from it. I did not have the audio. I just had the screenshots of the chat or the admin logs, basically. So Nick was in those conversations. He knows exactly what Turtleboy was doing and what he was saying. Now, Nick is obviously going to, I'm sure Nick has no idea if that evidence is real, but let's see what his response is.
Only got about 15 seconds before break. If you want to respond, you can.
Words are words. I mean, there's no proof of it. There is zero proof of any of it. So I could say the sky's green. Do you believe me, Kevin? I mean, it's as simple as that. So we'll see what happens.
All right.
I'm not trying to be hypercritical here. I mean, obviously, I put him on the spot there, but he brought it up earlier, so he's aware of it. He should have been thinking about this more. And to say words are words, well, words are testimony too. So if Turtleboy was to flip and you put him on the stand and he testifies that Karen instructed him to say that to Jen McCabe, and Karen sent him addresses for the rolling rally. If you put Turtleboy on the stand, those are words, but they're also evidence that would be going before a jury, right? So words matter. It's words that he heard directly from Turtleboy, but doesn't want to say it, right? So I understand it. I understand that. I do understand that. So let's see what else we had. All right. So so today we also learned, so the defense filed a stay motion to try to get the trial postponed till April 25th. Now, I don't know why they pick April 25th, because as Alan Jackson said in court the other day, the feds didn't tell them how long it would take for them to make a decision. So if you delay it till April 25th and the feds still haven't made a decision, I don't. It's weird that they came up with that number. Why not May 1st? Like the trial date. It's really strange, right? So the trial date is April 1st, and they said that the feds didn't tell them how long it would take for a decision. Yet they asked for a postponement until April 25th. They didn't say why not go to May 1st? Why not give it a month? Very strange that they had that specific thing. So they must have some reason for believing that. So, and I see our YCT lawyer Heather is here. So good. Heather, because I don't have time to watch chat very closely at the moment, if you have some insight into this motion by the prosecution to get the attorney-client privilege messages of Karen and David Yannetti, based on the idea that Karen waived that. So let me know what you think. And actually, we can pull up. Let me pull up on the screen something for you guys. All right. All right. So he cited media interviews in a 5-part docuseries called "A Body in the Snow: The Trial of Karen Reed," in which Reed says, and I'm assuming this quote is accurate. I haven't checked it. So she said, and I think this is the moment where the argument is that she waived attorney-client privilege. So she said, and then when I hired David Yannetti, I asked him those questions the night of January 29th. Like, David, what if I don't know? What if I ran his foot over? Or what if I clipped him in the knee and he passed out, or went to care for himself and he threw up or passed out? So went to care for himself, not sure what she means. That might be a polite way of saying, did he go take a pee in the bushes? That's kind of similar to what I was throwing out there the other yesterday. And Kate and Matt thought it was crazy. So I'm willing to just say, okay, it's probably crazy. But I'm willing to try crazy ideas. You guys know me. I'm willing to throw something out there as an idea and see what people think about it. But if that's what Karen might be talking about, the same thing. So, so she says, I asked him those questions the night of January 29th. Now, Karen has said she referred into, this was in the 2020 interview or one of the other videos. She talks about the rumored message that was on between her and David Yannetti. That is the reason where Michael Proctor had to stop searching through her phone, because he saw a lawyer that was attorney-client privilege, and so the phone had to go to the taint team from that moment. So, there were rumors about what was in that message, in that it was pretty inculpatory for Karen. But, we don't know, because it's like a lot of these things. Words mean a lot, and the context of when they're said means a lot. So that's something that people, if you just take a quote in isolation, it can be really deceptive. But so she says, I asked him those questions the night of January 29th. So her phone had been taken by the troopers at 4:00 in the afternoon. So she must have been talking either on somebody else's phone or on the landline. But were there text messages before that? And so is she waiving her attorney-client privilege rights here just because she references a conversation that she may have had on a different phone? Because I'm not sure if this is the only thing that is the basis of saying she waived her messages, but doesn't sound like she's even referencing a text message. She's just referencing a phone conversation. So I'm not sure if there's anything else. I don't really see. It's worth taking the shot, and so Brennan is leaving no stone unturned. And a lot of times we don't know what the real game is. There may be some larger game at foot, this is what I've been saying since December. That going after Arca, being as thorough as he was, that the real game was not to get. It certainly wasn't to get Alan Jackson thrown off the case, and it was not to get the Arca guys thrown off the case, because that'd be great if you could do it, but that's not going to happen. There's no way they're going to get thrown off the case. So what was the real goal, right? Is it just busy work for the lawyers, right? For the staff? No, there's a goal. And what I speculated back, now I don't know, I don't have access to Hank Brennan. I wondered about somebody back then when his motions first began. He also had the motion for the phone records of Mr. and Mrs. Reed. And I'm like, there's got to be some goal here, because he knows he's not going to get those. And I don't know what the exact goal is for that particular one, but there was a goal. I guarantee it. And what we see here for the goal for going after this Arca stuff is that is a very long effort that achieved some important things. Had he not filed that motion in December going after the Arca stuff and pushed so hard on it, and he wanted the Rule 14 discovery, he wanted to know what the U.S. Attorney's Office had messaged Arca when they hired him. He wanted access to those specific messages, and he wanted to see what materials they were sent, that the U.S. Attorney sent Arca. And as a result of that, it seems like that was the main reason, this constant pressure that centered around that the U.S. Attorney's Office finally relented and said, the investigation's over. Now, I'm not saying it's not more complicated than that. We had a change in administration. The previous U.S. Attorney Josh Levy left at the end of January, and Leah Foley took over. And so she may be just getting up to speed on the case, but I don't know anything about Leah Foley. I don't know if she's a person of principle. Is she a person that is a company man, so she won't stand up to people like that, to people in the company when they do something wrong? Is she the kind of person that when she sees, like compared to a cop, let's say you have a good cop whose partner is taking money, right, on the take, corruption. And the good cop is like, all right, I'm not corrupt myself, but I'm not going to ever talk about this. It's none of my business, right? So is she a company man where she's not going to ever do anything to get the U.S. Attorney's Office or anybody in there in trouble? Or is she someone that actually has a conscience and a person of principle, a person of integrity, who says innocent people are being destroyed here in connection to the work done by my predecessor? So we're going to come clean. So the jury's still out on that. We don't know. She did terminate the investigation as of January 30th. Someone from the U.S. Attorney's Office told the parties that the investigation was ongoing. Now, that's bullshit. They weren't investigating anything. And so for it to no longer be ongoing just a couple weeks later, I think it was February 17th or 18th, February 18th, that the U.S. Attorney's Office reached out to the Canton Police, the District Attorney's Office, and also to the Mass State Police to say the investigation is over and there'll be no charges. Kind of weird that happened so close to, to January 30th when they're saying the investigation is ongoing. So did that investigation truly end within that 2 weeks? And then Leah Foley just did what she would have done anyways and revealed that? I doubt it. We would love to know, right? But she probably got, now Josh Levy's gone, but people that work for him are still there. People that work for him on this investigation, assistant U.S. attorneys and FBI agents. So did she get them together and say, what's the deal with this? You're telling these people there's an ongoing investigation. This is a high-profile case. Did you find anything? Is there an actual investigation? And so whatever she heard, she put a stop to it and said, all right, enough of this. And she not only put a stop to it, but she didn't have to do this. She took the step of reaching out to the other law enforcement partners, as she described them, to tell them that. Now, I'm going to say that hopefully Leah Foley is a work in progress. Apologize for leaving that up there. I'm going to say that's again, I apologize for leaving it up there. It's imperfect doing this when I try to be careful. But so anyways, Leah Foley hopefully is evolving towards understanding just how egregious the wrongdoing was by her predecessor, in that in the long run she is protecting or helping her department by coming clean, because most of this stuff is going to come out in the wash eventually. All right, it's getting hard. There's too much publicity around this case, and it's getting harder and harder to hide it. There's a pretty good chance that the inspector generals or the ethics department from Washington, someone's going to get a sniff of the wrongdoing here, and they're going to go digging around, and there's going to be a report. So if Leah Foley's smart, get ahead of it now. But above all things, you just hope that she is a do the right thing person. Those people seem to be rare. They don't seem to be in positions of power or the government usually, but because people in those positions are ambitious. And but do the right thing means if you have exculpatory evidence for the witnesses, you have to reveal it. For instance, if the feds got geofence data from the house, which would show that Colin Albert was gone, say by 12:15, maybe 12:18 at the latest, I'm just guessing, probably more like 12:15. It's irresponsible for her not to at least hand that over to Colin. And really, it should be handed over to the parties in the Karen Reed case. It should be handed over to Karen too, because yes, we all know Karen wants to just say that Colin might be a third-party culprit, but you could make the case that if Karen truly believes she's innocent, then her goal is to find the real killer. And if Colin Albert got in the car with Allie McCabe and went home 5-10 minutes before Karen and John arrived, then they can stop worrying about that angle. They can stop spending any resources with their private investigators or anything else, because Colin was in the car, if that's the case, right? So if the feds have that geofence data and they didn't release this, then heads should roll. Heads should roll, really. I mean, needs to be a major. It's completely unethical if that's the case. Now, we don't know what material the feds got. That's the other problem. they should be telling both parties what they did get. This should be a listing that they send. That should have been part of the TUI process. Now, there are ways to handle other areas of sensitivity. So, for instance, because of Brady versus Maryland, we all have Brady rights. Any defendant has Brady rights. And with the Brady rights, if one branch of the government has exculpatory evidence that'll clear, or not clear, but that will help the defendant, they're required to turn it over. In the case of the feds, it has to go through a TUI process, and which begins with a TUI request. So if you happen to be a defendant in a state case, and you think that the feds have exculpatory evidence that will help you, they're not going to just turn it over automatically, unfortunately. They're only required to turn it over after you file a TUI request. Either you or the prosecution, and in this case, both sides did. You file an official request with the feds saying, do you have any exculpatory or material evidence in this case? They're only now the feds are only required to turn over exculpatory evidence of the defendant. That's it. So what we're saying here is we think the feds have exculpatory evidence of the witnesses and they should turn it over. Now, in theory, there may have to be some precautions or some common sense to that. So let's say, for instance, you had, we know for a fact that the feds got the content of the messages. They got a warrant and got the content of the messages of most of the people in the house in 34 Fairview. So they could read those messages. They could read the texts. Now, those shouldn't be made public. And there's not only should they not be made public, there shouldn't even be a risk. Thank you, Arlene. Thank you very much. There shouldn't even be a risk of those ever going public through some other way. So like if you give it to a defendant and she leaks them. So there are limitations. It's not like everything should be released, but there's no reason you couldn't give both parties a list of all the evidence that you have. So for example, do you think I should go through the motion 65? I can. You mean the motion on the attorney-client privilege? I can do that. Let me, we can do that. Let me see if this is the right motion. Okay. And our regular here and friend Jen, True Crime Junkie, is the one that sent me this motion earlier today. I read through it while I was getting an IV set up. And thank you very much, Jen. Appreciate it. All right. So, yep, we got it here. So let me bring this up for you guys. But let me just finish on the point that I was making. And see, my goal is I'm like your personal Alessi. In case you're having trouble going to sleep, I'm here to help. All right. So to finish my thought, what I was saying on that. So they should be able to provide a list of the evidence that they collected. So for instance, they would inform both parties that they got geofence data on 34 Fairview from whatever time that they got. And that's not the same as making it public. And that's not even the same as sending it out to both parties. But if the parties request it, maybe you could send it out too. So, but you'd give this list of all the things that you got. So, for instance, I believe that the feds probably got geofence data, so they would know what devices are within a certain geographical area within a certain time. All right, they would know all devices, and I believe they got it for 34 Fairview, but I also believe they probably got it for other locations too. They may have got it for the Canton Police Station. Seeing how thorough they were trying to dig into this and at some point desperate, they probably also got it for Chris Albert's house to see what time exactly Colin got home. They probably got it for the McCabe's, see what time Allie got home. They probably got it for One Meadows to see what time Karen was in there. Let's see if nobody else was in there, right? They probably got it for, I mean, who knows? I mean, they may have got it for Kevin Albert, right? I mean, they were going, the feds were desperate. And the more they realized they were embarrassed by this, the more desperate they came to try to find stuff. But we don't know, and they aren't going to tell us. I can't think of any ethical reason why they would not be able to at least give to the parties what evidence they got. So if they got geofence for any of these locations, that should go to the parties. And then maybe the parties have to make an argument with them or with the judge to say, all right, we've looked at this, your list of evidence, and we want the geofence data for 34 Fairview. And then they give that. So, all right. So let's go to this Commonwealth's motion to compel communications between the defendant and Attorney Yannetti stored within the defendant's cell phone data. The Commonwealth seeks all texts, emails, or written communications between the defendant, Karen and Yannetti, restricted to those communications that occurred between January 29th and February 2nd. The privilege holder, Karen Reed, has waived her attorney-client privilege with Attorney Yannetti relative to any statements about her collision with John O'Keefe during the time of those 3 days. The defendant voluntarily and intentionally disclosed the existence of these communications and her initial thoughts about her culpability for causing the death of John O'Keefe during various public interviews. The communications confirmed by the defendant to exist are no longer privileged nor confidential because the defendant chose to widely and publicly disseminate them. So let's go back to this footnote. Pursuant to search warrant, the Commonwealth received the contents of the defendant's cell phone. Because of an observed attorney-client communication, the phone data was provided with the assent of the defense to the Attorney General's office, and a court-ordered taint team protocol was implemented. So when you have this, the phone goes to the Attorney General's office in Boston, and they assign it to a taint team, which will remove any attorney-client privilege stuff. The Commonwealth received the defendant's phone data with any privileged communication excised. Given the defendant's public waiver of the attorney-client privilege as it pertains to the defendant's conversations with Yannetti and the following 3 days, the Commonwealth is entitled to the communications between the defendant and her lawyer. So again, we'll see what is said here, see what's more. But if the only thing we had is Karen saying that she talked on the phone, does that mean that she's waived attorney-client privilege generally so that you could get the text? I don't know. All right. So in support of this motion, the Commonwealth acknowledges and respects that the attorney-client privilege protects privileged communications between a client and his or her attorney. Massachusetts Rules of Evidence 523 provides who can waive. Part A. So waiver of privilege. Part A. Who can waive? A privilege holder or the holder's legally appointed guardian, administrator, executor, or heirs can waive the privilege. Conduct constituting the waiver. Except as provided in Section 524, the privileged matter disclosed erroneously or without opportunity to claim privilege, a privilege is waived if the person upon whom this article confers a privilege against disclosure. Yikes. There isn't even a period there. Except as provided in Section 524, the privileged matter disclosed erroneously. So if somebody says it in error or without opportunity to claim privilege, a privilege is waived if the person whom this article confers a privilege against disclosure voluntarily discloses or consents to disclosure of any significant part of the privileged matter. So, yes, so she did voluntarily disclose, and the key word is any, right? So, voluntarily discloses or consents to disclosure of any significant part of the privileged matter. And so Karen did seem to do that. Again, she's talking about a phone call, but she did. If the rule is if you voluntarily disclose any of it, then therefore you've waived it. The second part is if they've introduced privileged communications as an element of a claim or defense. Let's see, does that apply here? Introduces privileges communications as an element of a claim or defense. Yeah, it's borderline, but maybe if we go back to what that message was, like, David, what if I don't know? What if I ran his foot over? Or what if I clipped him in the knee and he passed out and he went to care for himself and he threw up or passed out? And then David said, yeah, then you have some element of culpability. So that's how I thought about things for 3 days. Does that satisfy number 2 here, the introduction of privileged communications as an element or a claim of defense? Yeah, I would say that it does, because she's using this to explain some of her statements that will be used against her in the trial. So I would say yes, that does satisfy that. C, conduct not constituting a waiver of attorney-client privilege. A person upon whom this article confers a privilege against disclosure does not waive the privilege if the person merely testifies as to events which were a topic of a privileged communication. The person merely testifies as to events which were a topic of a privileged communication. He testifies as to events. All right. Or 2, there is an unintentional disclosure of a privileged communication and reasonable precautions were taken to prevent the disclosure. All right. So 2 definitely does not apply because it was not unintentional. She's talking about it. But 1, the person merely testifies as to events which were a topic of a privileged communication. So that might apply here, right? Merely testifies as to events which were a topic of a privileged communication. I don't know how, I don't know how to interpret that, but clearly the topic here was the privileged communication. So I don't know. To ensure that only the communications that were waived are provided, the Commonwealth requests that this honorable court review in camera, so the judge will look at it in person, all text messages and written communications stored in the defendant's phone data for that time. In this case, the privilege holder, the defendant, has clearly and intentionally waived her attorney-client privilege regarding specific conversations she had with David Yannetti regarding the collision between her vehicle and John. For example, in the defendant's recorded interview with Voss, the defendant concedes, "You never said, 'Did I hit him?' I hit him." So when Gretchen asked that question, it's not based on her being aware of a text message. It's because these are what multiple witnesses heard Karen say. So she replies, "I said, could I hit him?" And then, when I talked to David, now this is later, David said, "Karen, if you incapacitated him in any way, this it says capability here. Come on, guys, get some spell check. It's supposed to be culpability." Man, this office. I know they're doing a lot, but damn, get some spell check. And I thought all right, maybe this is what maybe I said to my mother just to go forward a second. They were asking me, what was it like? Did they come out? What was the house like? Attorney Yannetti, Attorney Jackson, and Attorney Little were in attendance along with the defendant. So let's look at that again. So in the Voss interview, which we have not heard, but there were obviously parts of that used in Gretchen's article. I don't remember if this part was. So Karen, so let's see. She talked to David. David said to Karen, if you incapacitated him in any way, there's culpability there. And I thought, all right, maybe this is what maybe I said to my mother just to go forward a second. They were asking me, what was it like? Did they come out? What was the house like? Yeah, it's kind of hard to parse all that, but all right. Second, in a Vanity Fair article, Karen tells her story, a murder trial in Massachusetts, with a caption. As Karen reads second murder trial looms, she's ready to talk about what she says really happened. And that was published this past October. Who, according to the publication, was notably aware that anything she said could be used against her, volunteered a rumor. So yeah, I mentioned earlier, she talked about the rumor that alleged representations made by the Mass State Police that there is a text message between her and counsel that implicates herself. She says that's a provable lie. Interesting, right? So, yeah, I mean, I do remember her saying that, but in fact, I think that she said one thing that'd be able to show pretty easily if Karen was lying was just going to try to fix a charger on my light while I'm talking. I guess I can't really do that. Yeah. Anyways, so she says it was impossible because she never texted David Yannetti that day before they got her phone. So remember, there was only a couple hour period. She gets home, she's on the couch, she's hungover, and she searches over Google for DUI lawyer. That presumably is how she found David, and then called him up. Is she telling the truth when she says she had no text messages? It'll be kind of interesting, but it's not. It's not a crime for Karen to lie to a TV reporter, to a journalist. Fortunately for her, it's not, right? Fortunately for Turtleboy, it's not. So it's not necessarily if they get, even if they were to get the fact that if from her phone they were able to get the communications without the content. So if we knew that she had exchanged a series of messages with David that afternoon, that would prove that she lied to Vanity Fair, but there's nothing illegal about that. And frankly, the nature of the people in her supporters, they don't care. They could find out that she, ate a child for breakfast and they wouldn't care. They would say, well, it's good protein. All right. Third, in the now airing 5-part docuseries called A Body in the Snow, the Karen Reed trial, the defendant professes, she says, and then when I hired David Yannetti, I asked him, unfortunately, we've lost in this document here. It's a photocopy, so I'm missing a couple of sentences here. But I think it's the one I just read on the other thing anyways, where she says ran his foot over, or what if, yeah, that is the word. I clipped him, he passed out and went to himself and he threw up or passed out. And David said, yeah, then you have the element of culpability. At least it's spelled right there. And so that's how I thought about things for about 3 days. The privilege holder is the defendant, and the defendant intentionally waived her privilege by disclosing her conversations in a nationwide audience with her attorney. So is disclosing the existence of conversations does that equate to waiving attorney-client privilege? I don't think it would. But the fact that she's, like if she just said, "Hey, I talked to my lawyer," in those few days afterwards, does that constitute waiving attorney-client privilege? I seriously doubt it. But where she used it to talk about the nature of those discussions, does that waive it? I don't know. In addition to rendering the communications non-privileged, the communications are relevant as admissions and statements of the defendant. These statements are admissible, substantively, sorry, and Attorney Yanetti's statements to the defendant are admissible pertaining to the defendant's state of mind. Also, the defendant's admissions and Attorney Yanetti's statements are relevant to challenge the defense's later purported claims for third-party culpability. The communications have relevance to rebut the defense's potential claims that some other person committed the crimes that caused the death of John O'Keefe. Moreover, the defense has suggested that as part of its defense, it is likely to pursue a Bowden-type defense. So the Bowden defense is where the defense says that that the investigators made a bad error by not pursuing angles of inquiry that they should have. So in other words, in this case, that they didn't investigate inside the house. The potential evidence is relevant to rebut the claims of law enforcement contrivance. Oh, and there's an affidavit too. I didn't get to. I only read the opening paragraph of this when Chen sent it to me earlier, so I didn't even know this is here. All right, so there's an affidavit. Hank says he has reviewed several public statements made by the defendant relative to this case, including but not limited to the defendant's interview with Gretchen Voss and her appearance on an ongoing documentary. The Commonwealth intends on introducing a number of the defendant's statements, including the statements included in the attached motion. Pursuant to a search warrant, the Commonwealth is in possession of the defendant's cell phone data. The data is subject to a taint team protocol, and any redacted communications are not available to undersigned counsel for review. Undersigned counsel requests this court review any redacted communications ex parte and provide the Commonwealth all relevant. So they want the judge to look at this. And if the judge also concludes that attorney-client privilege was waived for these 3 days, then the Judge Canoni would hand these over to the prosecution. I believe the communications requested are non-privileged because the discussions with Attorney Yannetti during the requested time frame and subject matter of this defendant striking John have been intentionally disclosed to the public by the privilege holder and are no longer confidential. So I don't know. It's interesting, right? Very, very interesting. Now, another thing I'd like to go over. Let's go over the last couple of articles by Anonymous. Always good food for thought. Let me find these here. I always have a mix of some private messages with Anonymous and then all right. Yeah, so let's go right to his Substack. All right, so this is from, that's February 26th. No, we don't want that one. That's an old one. All right, let's go with this one. I think the last one I did for him was where he talks about zombie facts. So I'm going to start reading this one here, and if for some reason if for some reason it feels familiar, like we've read it before, we'll stop. But I don't think I've read this one on the air. So, and this is as big as I can make it. I'm sorry, guys. So, all right, this is from Anonymous Mass Lawyer from March 15th, and then he'll have some other thoughts after that as he has time to digest some of it. So, all right, a new documentary about the Karen Reed case, A Body in the Snow, is being released Monday. In particular, the portion, let's see, the last time I ever saw him, A Body in the Snow. All right. In particular, the portion that starts just after the 2-minute mark is critical to the case. This is the part where Karen describes arriving at 34 Fairview. The substance of her remarks tracks with her Nightline interview from 2023 when she first claimed that she saw John enter the house. But there's a little more detail in this version because that's one of the things she's been adding detail to this all along. Are those memories resurfacing? I guess that's probably what people on that side would say. More just kind of inventing things as needed, I would say. But, all right. She claims as soon as she pulled in front of the house, John got out of the SUV, took her full vodka soda that she'd brought with her from the waterfall. I don't know if there's any evidence of her walking out with a drink. There is evidence of him walking out with a drink. She then describes watching him walk quickly up to the side door of the house and enter. And it should be noted too. So I don't know when the last day that they recorded with Karen, but most of the recording would have been before and during the trial. So when Karen describes herself leaving with the vodka, now, of course, there was testimony that she arrived from C.F. McCarthy's to the waterfall with a drink. Some of the witnesses had testified that. She denied that. She has denied that. But it does seem to be that's probably true. So she probably felt like, I'm with a cop, I can do those kind of things. And she feels very entitled anyways. So, but maybe she said this not realizing how clear, even though they would have had the waterfall video in discovery for a long time, maybe she didn't realize just how clearly the prosecution was going to focus on that drink in John's hand as he was walking out. Or maybe they both left with a drink, I don't know. She then describes walking him quickly up to the side door of the house and enter. She claims that after 2 to 3 minutes, she got tired of waiting, so she called him. He didn't answer. After about waiting 10 minutes, she says she finally got fed up and left. So one of the issues here that came up in the hearing yesterday a lot was Alan Jackson saying there's no evidence of Karen being angry at John that night until the voicemails. And so is there any evidence of it? Well, it is sparse. So but there is some evidence. So the state is trying to say their narrative is that Karen was already very upset about the fact that John seemed to be breaking up with her. She's jealous, as we saw in the Aruba trip. She's angry when she's jealous, and especially if she's been drinking. So they're on their way to 34 Fairview. They're not sure how to get there, so John calls Jen McCabe, and Jen mentions it's near so-and-so's house, and this is a person that Karen knew John had used to date. So the state's theory is that is what triggered the rage. But, we won't truly ever know because only 2 people were in the car and one of them's dead. However, we do know that 3-point turn that she took on Cedar Crest seems to have been done in anger because she had... Sorry, just getting a message. Oh, okay. So thank you. Kim sent me a court TV discussion about this motion that we just talked about. So that sounds interesting. So let's I'm going to go to that link after I finish this article. So hang with me, guys. I know you guys should be out dancing on bars. and drinking all the way to last call and having fun, but we don't do that kind of stuff anymore, right? So, and if you do, God bless you. If you do, you're not listening to me tonight. That's for sure. All right. So again, she says that after 2 to 3 minutes, she got tired of waiting. Now, in older versions of this story, she said she was texting John, but now she no longer says that because the evidence from her phone shows that she didn't text John until I think it was 12:53, 12:54, something like that. So it was several minutes. Like 20 minutes after she had arrived back at One Meadows, John's house. So she never texted John while she was waiting outside. And it doesn't seem like she called either because the first call was at 12:33. The fact that she got home at 12:36 tells us she was probably on the road at 12:23. So at 12:33 rather. So there's no the phone communications don't support the idea of Karen sitting there and calling anybody and calling John or texting him. Okay, so Anonymous says it's unclear when this interview took place, but based on my understanding of when the documentary was filmed, it was likely at some point before the end of the first trial. Correct. What's remarkable to me about this story is how little it tracks with the known evidence. Some things are just demonstrably untrue. For example, we know precisely when they arrived at 34 Fairview at 12:24 a.m., and I'll narrow it down even more. They arrived at they took the right-hand turn from Cedar Crest onto Fairview at 12:24 and 18 seconds. We know that from John's Ways. So 34 Fairview is the second house on the right. So figure maybe you're driving a little bit slow at that point because you're looking for the house. But so they arrived and we also know what time they arrived at the end of the street, which wasn't long after that. So they arrived at the foot of the driveway, probably 12:24 and 30 seconds. We may get more accurate data from John's phone in the next trial. We'll see. They should know exactly what time they arrived based on the GPS points. They didn't track it in the first trial, but they tracked enough GPS points to tell us that was available. They just didn't think it was important enough to include that in the first trial, I believe. All right. So, and we know when Karen's phone pinged at One Meadows. And we'll just quote, he says 12:36. That's correct. We'll just quote, it's actually, to quote Trooper Garino, it's around 12:36. So that around implies a little bit of a range. So it could be 12:36 and 50 seconds, 12:36 and 5 seconds. We don't know. The first call that Karen made to O'Keefe was at 12:33. Correct. Yep. By which point she would already have to have left 34 Fairview in order to be home by 12:36. I agree. So there's no way she called him while still parked out front. Yep, 100%. 100% with you, Anonymous. We also know that from the GPS data, which Reed's team made no real effort to dispute at trial, and this is important. See, the stuff that escapes the Free Karen readers' notice, it's just mind-blowing. I've pointed this out many times. Karen's team never questioned the accuracy of the GPS data. Not at all. They didn't bring in an expert to do it, and they didn't have, I think it was David Yannetti that did that part of the questioning. He didn't do it at all. What they questioned, the only thing that they did question was the time stamps. So they said that, so obviously this GPS has to attach itself to an internal clock inside your phone. And what they were trying to say was there was different clocks running in a phone, and some of them might be 3 minutes different than the others. I'm not an expert on that, but I know that GPS is based on accuracy of the clocks. That's a crucial part of calculating your position. In fact, the most accurate clocks in the world are these atomic clocks, were invented for this very purpose. So I think it's rather unlikely that that the clocks were off, but that's the best that the defense could do. But even if you bought into that, like Nick Rocco bought into it on Court TV, he'd say, well, see, the reason they had to do this was because the health app had John going up and down stairs. I don't remember the exact time off the top of my head, but it was basically between 12:22 and 12:24 and maybe 24 seconds or something like that. That's the window within which John supposedly was going up and down stairs. It doesn't make sense with the GPS data. So what they tried to suggest was that the GPS that was the clock that was attached to was off by a few minutes. So that might offer, in their view, an explanation to how the GPS could show that John was outside of Karen's house. I mean, the 34 Fairview at the time when the health app says they were. Sorry. Yeah. So if the GPS had been off by a couple minutes, then, well, I think you guys get the point. So I'm sorry I'm not articulating well, but if it was off a couple of minutes, then that point where the GPS shows that John was outside the house, maybe he was on the way, right? So that's what they're trying to say. So, man, been a long day. Sorry I didn't articulate that well at all. I need to start drinking again. All right. So we also know from the GPS data, which Reed's team made no real effort to dispute, that John's phone never went inside the house. It never left the general vicinity of the flagpole. And this is true. And so what you have, I won't go into the links, we've talked about it many times, but GPS, you get it every second, that point, and that point that tells you where you're located or where your phone is located also comes with the signal strength. The signal strength comes, so based on the signal strength, you determine the margin of error. The normal margin of error for for your GPS on your phone is about 15 feet. So when you get where you're sitting right now, if you were to get the GPS from your phone, if you're getting full normal signal, you're somewhere within a circle has a 15-foot diameter that's put down there, and you're just as likely to be anywhere within that circle. But if you're sitting somewhere, like, I don't know how to look the GPS up on my phone, but because I'm in the house, maybe the signal is not that strong. So but it's always measured from moment to moment. So if the signal strength is not strong because I'm sitting in the house or because I'm going through the Sumner Tunnel, you know what the signal strength is. So you always know what the margin of error is. And with John's phone, there was only a 4-second period where the margin of error, where the signal weakened enough to expand the margin of error enough to include the house. 4 seconds. That's it. 4 consecutive seconds. So the only way that John could have gone in that house is if he got out of the car where they found him, because that was where his GPS point was, then somehow ran into the house and got back out in 4 seconds. Now, even if he was running to the house just to ring the doorbell and run back out, to do that in 4 seconds, you'd have to be Usain Bolt. It's not impossible for a human being to do it, but you'd have to be incredibly fast. But that certainly leaves no time to go into the house. Certainly leaves no time to go into the house, get attacked by a dog and beat up, and then somehow end up back outside on the exact same spot on the lawn. In addition, there's no points that ever show John moving up the street back towards the driveway or moving in the direction of the house or in the house. So the GPS is conclusive here. John's phone never went in the house. That's basic fact. And unfortunately, that was something that the documentary, like many other things, they just chose to skip over. And I'm not trying to nitpick it, but I don't think the purpose of the documentary, I guess, was to really try the case. I think their purpose was to capture the moment, the feeling of all this, and within that, to try to be as fair as they could. So it is what it is. All right. So, and of course, we also know that this story is contradicted not only by the testimony of all 9 of the witnesses who were in the house, who made clear John never entered, but even more critically by the 3 eyewitnesses in the truck who pulled up to 34 Fairview at the same time as Karen and John. These witnesses, who were directly behind Reed's SUV, all testified that they didn't see anyone exit the vehicle while they were there, which was probably at least 3 to 5 minutes. So, as I looked at this case, I didn't really factor in very much the testimony of the occupants, which is primarily Ryan Nagel, who was sitting in the passenger seat, just because they're showing up to pick someone up, but they've been drinking, it's late at night, they're talking to each other, they could be playing with the radio, they could be looking at their phone, don't know what they're looking at and what they're paying attention to. So it was not impossible to me that John could have got out of the car and gone up the driveway and they didn't see. So their testimony was not very decisive to me, but it is still important. They didn't see anybody. So why did Karen choose to go with this story? One she first introduced to the world over a year and a half after the incident. By that point, she and her legal team had to have a pretty good idea of what evidence she'd be up against at trial. I think the reason has to, and we should remind ourselves too, that Karen was arrested a second time in June, and we've all seen the body cam footage of her being brought into the police station. And that's when she talks about, we all know the truth. It's a joke. We're all in this joke, right? That we know that John was beat up by Brian and his uncle, his nephew. So certainly by June of 2022, Karen was well along the path to saying that John was killed in the house, or at least was killed by the residents of the house. So, so it's in terms of her publicly stating that took a while, but she was stating it there. I think the reason has to do with the point I was trying to hammer home in my mock opening statement. If you look closely at the timeline here, the gap in our knowledge of what happened that night is very small, no more than a few minutes. It's the time between when the Nagel truck pulled away, likely somewhere between 12:27 and 12:30, I agree, and when John's phone stopped moving at 12:32. And we can safely infer, based on the time she arrived at home at One Meadows, that Karen was still present at the crime scene for almost all of the gap period. Yep. Well, and we're going to find out more on this, I believe, from the new chip-off data. But we do know that 8 minutes and 8 seconds after the three-point turn that they did on Cedar Crest, Karen's car was in high speed at reverse when she struck a pedestrian-sized object, and that happens to be 3 or 4 seconds before John last moved, or his phone last moved. That's bulletproof, and it can't be shaken, and you can't argue around it. All right, so the time frame severely constricts the universe of possible things that could have happened to John. So I think what Reed was trying to do when she first told this story was to expand the relevant time frame to allow for more possibilities, to create a larger gap in the known timeline. The only way she could think to do that was to suggest that John O'Keefe immediately bolted from the SUV up into the house upon their arrival so quickly that the witnesses in the truck somehow didn't notice him. Yep. And in this scenario, Karen is alone in the SUV for those 8 minutes or so prior to her departure. And any movement registered on John's phone during those 8 minutes corresponds to whatever activity he was engaged in inside the house. This, of course, still does not account for the GPS data. Again, I'm reading anonymous lawyer's article, and I agree with all this. As I explained in a prior post, I think Karen's public recounting of this story really boxed in her defense team in the first trial, preventing them from pivoting the defense strategy in a way that better embraced the ARCA testimony. The more, because we should say, remind people that the parties did not have access to the ARCA report until February or March of last year, whenever the feds turned it over, possibly March. So Karen had long made her theory of how John was killed before that. It was a first made official when, in the motion for Brian Albert's phone on April 12th of 2023. And that's when they laid out their whole conspiracy theory. And then they began pushing it publicly less than a week later through Turtleboy. All right. The more detailed version of this story that she provided in the upcoming documentary will further complicate her ability to retool her defense. And the only thing, and this has been a theme of Anonymous, is, and the only thing I would ask him is, just because something has been pushed in the public, does that mean you have to push that same thing in front of the jury? Because in theory, if you have an objective jury, you might be able to push something different. Although there's a risk with that, because the goal for jury pool contamination in the first place is to get jurors on to the trial that have already heard something about this. And so if you do end up with jurors And that's generally what they're trying to do. That's why they want the panel voir dire, which they didn't get. But they want to get turtle riders onto this jury. They did last time, and they want to get more this time. That's their goal. The goal is a mistrial. The goal is not an acquittal. That is not a goal here. Do they get them on there? If you do get those on there, will they be influenced if the defense comes out with a completely different strategy? I don't know the answer to that, right? Because it depends. If the people that get on the jury have a lean a certain way just because of what they've heard in the media, then that might affect them. But if they're, if they're Kool-Aid drinking, turtle riding FKR, I don't think they would care if the defense changed the strategy. I don't think they would care if the defense said Martians did it. I mean, they're so far gone that it doesn't matter. And they're willing to lie their way under oath to get on a jury. So, all right. As I've noted, I think there are two key ways in which the defense could shift their strategy in the second trial, which are closely related. The first is to embrace the possibility that whatever altercation supposedly happened outside, near the spot where John's body was eventually found. This is really the only way to reconcile the GPS data, and which is true. The GPS. Well, the only other way is to say that John went in the house without his phone, and so I actually tried to write a chapter from Karen's point of view in the book. I'd say right up that it's speculative, from her point of view, and the only way I could make sense of it was that Karen dropped John off, and seconds later she pulls up to the far part of the property. And when she gets there, she notices John's phone on the seat. Fell out of his, he left it in the car. And so, and when she leaves, pissed off, she throws that phone into the yard. But at least the problem is, why has Karen never said that? But that's the only way that I can even begin to try to make sense of how that phone could have been how the phone could not have gone in the house, but John did. That's like the only thing that would make sense, right? All right. So moreover, it wouldn't require. So if you didn't go with a theory of John going in the house, then you don't need to turn every person inside the house into a liar or part of some sinister conspiracy, as Anonymous says. For that reason alone, it's always puzzled me that the defense has maintained so adamantly that O'Keefe went inside the house. The other potential pivot available to the defense, as I've explained previously, is to more fully embrace the so-called cocktail glass theory posited by Arca. In listening to others discuss this idea, I realized that I haven't been super clear about what the defense's embrace of this theory might look like. Putting aside the complication of Karen's media statements, here's a basic outline of a theory that has been available to the defense since they first learned of the Arca report. So the theory would run like this. Karen and John pull up to 34 Fairview. They're arguing. After Nagel pulls away the truck, maybe about 12:27, John gets out of the SUV. Of course, we now learned yesterday, this is after Anonymous wrote this article, that the state apparently has evidence, probably from the vehicle data, although possibly from the temperature log on John's phone. They know what time John got out of the car. He got out of the car at 12:30. So this is, there's just more and more evidence is accruing here. Hard to understand how the defense is not seeking a plea deal, but all right. Let's see, so Karen barks something to John as he's walking away. He responds by turning and angrily throwing the vodka soda towards the back of the SUV, which shatters the taillight and causes pieces of taillight debris to fall to the road. The wind is howling, the car stereo is playing loudly, and Karen is intoxicated, so she doesn't quite realize what happened. Again, this is Anonymous. He's not saying this is what happened. He is trying to propose what the defense could say. So she felt a thump. Of course, I don't know how, I don't know. I guess the defense could try to say this in closing argument, right? So, all right. She felt a thump, maybe heard a noise, but didn't realize that what John had done. The real killers watch this scene unfold and approach John outside. So this is, the idea is that they're watching from the window and they see John throw the glass at the truck, at Karen's SUV. So now they come outside because they, for some reason, want to kill John. Everyone is drunk. Something gets said, and some kind of altercation ensues, resulting in John being badly injured. So yeah, so he's saying that they come outside like to say, "Hey, what's going on here? Why is it and then they're all drinking, so a fight breaks out, and John gets injured. So they try to incorporate the damage to the taillight. So in this scenario, it's possible that the real killers didn't even notice at first how badly John was injured, that he or they just walked away and only later realized how badly he'd been hurt. I mean, I don't consider this to be crazy. Back when I was trying to in the early days of trying to understand what possibly could have happened here, I remember when I first heard this story from Turtleboy's article, you wondered, I'm thinking like, could John have gotten a fight in the house and then left, and nobody else in the house realized that once outside he passed out and died of hypothermia. Those were ideas that I entertained back when first trying to look at the basic evidence. So once they do realize that John is dead or mortally wounded, they see the taillight debris and realize they can blame this on Karen. Whether immediately or later that night, they staged the scene to look like an accident, removing John's shoe and placing it by the curb, arranging some of the taillight pieces around it, and crushing up some taillight debris to place on his clothes. Or alternatively, the defense could argue that John was standing close enough to the SUV that he shattered the taillight, that some of the small debris landed on him. They also moved the broken cocktail glass over to his body to make it look like he was holding and he was hit. So he's Anonymous is including that because he's heard me talk a lot about how the cocktail glass ended up. I mean, but again, my YCT rule number 1, there are no geniuses and there are no idiots. They're pretty rare in cases, right? So if your theory requires a genius or an idiot, so that would be pretty damn clever. Again, Anonymous, this is not his theory at all. He's proposing this is what the defense could use. So, but the idea that the defense, they're going to tell people that these guys outside drunk get in a fight and they're already arranging taillight pieces and moving the cocktail glass near the body, that's requiring a level of intelligence from drunken people that is none of us would ever be able to achieve. But also it requires us to ignore the fact that the vehicle data shows that Karen went in reverse for 24 miles an hour for several seconds. All right. What you'll notice about this story is that in almost every way, it is more plausible and coherent story than the one Karen's defense team actually went with in the first trial. It only requires 1 or 2 people from the house to have been involved, not all 9 of them. And it doesn't require any kind of law enforcement involvement. So no planting of evidence. No evidence is planted other than by the killers themselves. Even the DNA and hair could conceivably have been planted by someone like Brian Higgins, who had access to the salad port. Or Kevin Albert, right? Had access to the salad port too. No need to involve Proctor or the Mass State Police. Unlike the defense story from the first trial, this story is also consistent with the GPS evidence and the testimony of the witnesses in the Nagel truck. And perhaps most importantly, this story doesn't require the real killers to have made a bunch of bizarre and inexplicable decisions, such as dragging a body out onto their own lawn with no plan for what came next. So, I mean, Anonymous has done a great job over his articles showing how preposterous the conspiracy theory was when you get into each aspect of it. This is something that many of us have done for a while, me and Matt from Boundless, and obviously Kate Peter. So he articulates it very well. And so he's trying to come up with a plausible defense. There really is no plausible defense. And so let me just finish. He says, to be clear, I do not believe this story at all. Indeed, I've been hesitant to even flesh it out in this much detail. Let's see. I probably can furnish this. So let's just go to his last paragraph. So the defense has a tough choice to make. They can stick with their original story, which makes no sense, is wildly implausible, and is contradicted by lots of strong evidence, or they can pivot to the cocktail glass theory, which is much more coherent. plausible and consistent with the evidence, at least by comparison, but is completely inconsistent with the story Reed has been telling the world through her media interviews for 2 years to come. I'm really not sure which way they'll go at this point. All right. So more fine work by Anonymous. Thank you, Anonymous. And thank you for allowing us to use your articles. So I believe that the defense. All right. We're going to go to the video that Kim just sent in a moment. But I want to give you my. Let me just line this up. All right. All right. So this video on Court TV, thank you, Kim, is under 8 minutes. All right. So I believe what the defense is going to do is similar to what they did last time, with a big exception. Trying to hammer these witnesses and these firefighters and stuff and the people in the house when they're clearly just normal, regular people had to backfire. It just pisses people. It pisses a lot of jurors off. So I think that was a mistake. If you want to go after Brian Higgins or Brian Albert, that's different because they're police officers. So police officers are a little bit, the public will consider them more of a fair target. But to go after Katie McLaughlin, the firefighter, and the other firefighters, and Flamati and whatever these guys, I forget all their names, and go after the people in the house, it doesn't make sense. So, but I do think, other than that, they're going to what they're going to do is, I think, where I would say the mistake that some people, not this defense, but maybe let's just say Anonymous here, where I would disagree with him. I don't think the defense, I think where he's thinking is that the defense needs to come up with a very specific alternative theory to what happened. And I've been saying for a long time, that's a mistake if they do that. It's a mistake. And you don't want the jury spending a lot of time trying to poke holes in your theory. You want them poking holes in the other side's theory. What you want to do is be vague enough. The defense does not have to prove any theory. So you want to just, the more that the jury is confused, that's a win for the defense. It's not a win for the prosecution. So if you put up a bunch of vague things like isn't that weird, and maybe that could have happened, and what's up with those butt dials, and who is Brian Higgins talking to on the phone, and then you combine, so you have a little bit of doubt that you create on the state side by having witnesses like the ARCA guys and Dr. Russell come in and testify, and that might not be enough to alone get the jurors to dismiss the evidence put forward by the state, if that evidence put forward by the state is very convincing. But then on top of that, you just try to create some vague other possibilities and an overall feeling that something really unusual happened here. The state's case is that nothing unusual happened. It's a hit and run. They happen all the time. It's a little bit unusual, the circumstances, where you have the car going in reverse and striking someone, and the injuries, the fatal injuries don't come from the car, but they come from hitting your head on the ground, and you die from hypothermia, and there's no witnesses. So there are some, don't get me wrong, there are some aspects of it that are even make this a somewhat unique case. But what really makes this case, what would make this case unique, is if you make people think that something really unusual went on here. And so you bring in stuff about butt dials. Why didn't people see the body on the lawn? Right? You bring in enough of that stuff. You don't need a specific theory. You just need to make it enough where jurors are confused. And what I've seen in this last 2 years, just by talking to people in the public, and that includes many lawyers, is that very few people really are methodical in how they sort out evidence. Most people are trying to sort it out in a logical way, but they get distracted by all these odd things. What about this and what about that? That's what the defense wants, and that's what they're going to go after here. That's my theory. All right, so let's play this clip from Court TV. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you. Oh, let's say thank you to the people that made contributions. So Mark gifted 5 Yellow Cottage Tales memberships, and thank you very much, Mark. As I like to tell everybody, you get nothing with your membership. You're doing it to support me. I mean, I would like to find some way to give it back to people. Maybe when things die down, we can do a party somewhere and the drinks are on me. But I have never been able to figure out any way. I did do a members only show. I could go back to that, but there's going to be time until after the trial. And there were some technical hurdles for trying to do that too. Charlie with a super sticker donation. Thank you very much, Charlie. I appreciate your support. Arlene Lima. Thank you, Lima. Much appreciated. Andy Dufresne, Kim, thank you for all you do with the case. So, and I think that's hashtag Officer John O'Keefe. So thank you, Andy. And Wicked Uma, another one of our great regulars, also gifted 5 Yellow Cottage memberships. So thank you very much. All right, so let's go to this discussion on Court TV about this very unusual motion to get attorney-client privileges. Oh, I gotta get my headphones on.
Of Massachusetts in the case against Karen Reed, the Judge Beverly Cadoni, has granted, in part, the Commonwealth's motion to receive communication between Karen Reed and Aiden Kearney. We know that, aka Turtleboy. There they are talking in the courtroom this week. And this is big. This is a big win for the state. The motion includes communication between Turtleboy and any witnesses involved in the murder of John O'Keefe. It also grants the Commonwealth access to pictures and videos depicting any evidence of intimidation, because this is a big part of their case, that they believe that Turtleboy was intimidating witnesses. And we heard that come out in the first Karen Reed trial. To what degree it comes out this time, it still remains to be seen. She, of course, is accused of running over her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, back in 2022. Another bombshell of a motion has been filed by the Commonwealth. And this is interesting. The Commonwealth now wants text messages between Karen Reed and David Yannetti. David Yannetti's her lawyer. That's her first lawyer, the Boston-based attorney. They want it from 1/29 to 2/2/2022. So January 29th through February 2nd. Why? Because they argue that she waived attorney-client privileges for those dates because she talked about a conversation that she had with David Yannetti in one of the documentaries that she's done. If you've watched this Out in the Snow, the Body in the Snow documentary on Discovery ID, it's fascinating. They have huge access. Well, she talks about, I had a discussion with Yannetti. They're arguing because she talked publicly that they should get text messages between her and her attorney. Matt Johnson's going to be joining us much more next hour, but let's bring in Jacqueline Goodman. Where do we start? Let's start with Turtleboy. The Commonwealth really wants to make sure that this jury in Karen Reed 2 has the same as jury in 1, and that is that they get a sense of this witness intimidation. They want these two cases to be brought together. Right now, Turtleboy's got his own track going. What's your take on Judge Cadoni allowing at least the weaponry, the info to be shared with them? Whether or not they'll be able to present it or not, we'll have to wait and see at trial. But one would argue a big win for the Commonwealth to receive that information concerning Karen Reed and Turtleboy texts.
Sure, it's a huge win for the prosecution, and it's the first of 2 hurdles that they've got to cover. So initially, it's the disclosure that the prosecution wants, and then they go through that information. They still have another hurdle at trial as to its admission in front of that jury. But boy, that's quite a win for the prosecution. Obviously, that's a pretty devastating blow to the defense.
Because the sense that if you're a juror and you think these innocent people that are just witnesses are being intimidated. It does. It adds a color to it. And the defense was able to sort of do that reversal wise with the investigators, Trooper Proctor, et cetera, give you a bad feeling. If they can replicate that, it'll be bode well for them. What's your take on this other motion just filed today? They want communications between her and David Yannetti.
That really strikes fear in the hearts of every criminal defense lawyer, I'll tell you, and every lawyer. The attorney-client privilege is so sacrosanct that it is really difficult to pierce that veil, if you will. But what happens is that someone goes on television like this, talks and talks in this documentary, a very, very bad idea if charges are pending or can be brought. And then they disclose what is part of this otherwise protected communication. And when someone does that, that's what we call waiver. They waive the privilege. So even though the law really does protect that attorney-client privilege very carefully, so that we want clients to be able to speak very freely with them, the client can waive that privilege. They're privileged to waive. And when they these communications to third parties, well, then it's sort of what's, if you can go on and say, this is the privileged communication and therefore it helps me, then the prosecution can now know what is the rest of that story and does it really help you? So it's a way for the prosecution or for the other party in any event to speak back to those claims and to be able to parse those claims and challenge the credibility of the spin that the witness is giving to those communications. So it can be very devastating. You can imagine the treasure trove of information that is going to be in attorney-client privileged communications with someone who is facing these types.
Oh, absolutely. And especially in this case of all cases, just the insanity that revolves around this case. They're only looking for a couple days, you know, it's January 29th through February 22nd, because that's what they say that she opened the door. But can you open a door? We see it all the time in a case here on Court TV where someone does it on the witness stand or someone does it in a courtroom. They open the door to a subject and boom, now the other side has the ability to walk right through it. Can you really open the door to attorney-client privilege out there on television or in public? Does that argument make sense to you?
It does. I see what you're saying. The difference between saying these things from the stand and saying them out in the real world. But the answer is yes. The privilege is something that is very closely protected, and so as you've seen, and even in the request, the court and the people are asking for something that is very short and distinct, a very clear parameter to what communications they're asking for, because they don't broad with the request, and the court is definitely not going to want to be overly broad, allow just complete openness about their communications. But yes, making those statements on the documentary allows it's the waiver, and that waiver can take place inside the courtroom and outside the courtroom. So the remedy might be slightly different given the surrounding circumstances, but the waiver is the waiver wherever that occurs, and the prosecution now can speak back to this discovery because it's literally just been waived. Right. Narrowly drawing that remedy for the prosecution is the way the court is going to balance that difference.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll see what Judge Cannoni says about that one. But
so wow, we'll see what's in this. We'll see if she grants access to those texts to David Yannetti. We'll see what's actually in them. That's stunning. Unfortunately, that was the most interesting parts of her take there. She had a little bit of a bad connection, so it got choppy, but there was enough for her to say that this attorney believes that Karen did waive her attorney-client privilege for those communications in that time frame by talking about them in the documentary. So this is, wow, just this is a case that just has more twists and turns, and it feels like it's never going to win. So, Steph, I see your question. Yeah, so I put it on the screen because I was scrolling through earlier while I was watching that. And the question was, do you think the prosecution will get the Discovery ID unsolved footage that they're trying to get? No idea. You know, it's so close up to this point in the trial. I had asked them months ago that. So when I was after I had filmed with them the second time, and now I knew them much better, and my sense of them as people is that they were honest and decent people and of integrity. And I would never once have, I never asked them what their opinion was on the case. It was, as professional documentary makers, I wouldn't expect them to tell me. And I would respect them more that they don't, right? They're, especially the style of their documentary, it doesn't have any narration, is to just talk to people from both sides and get their words and put it in there. But there's a lot of editing that goes on. So, for instance, I debunked on film with them everything, every part of the conspiracy theory. I also gave them the bulletproof evidence, including the fact that the GPS shows that John never went in the house. And unfortunately, they chose to leave that on the edit room floor. But I understand why, too. But it's unfortunate because the defense and the prosecution was allowed to say a lot of things that just are bullshit. They don't add up. And even, what's her name? Sue O'Connell said some things that I'm not criticizing her. I have the better information on it, on the timelines and what exactly would happen. And unfortunately, she has the newsroom behind her. So that brings more weight. So they're able to go with that. But I mean, I had better information and stronger arguments. But unfortunately, we're stuck not being able to do it. But so I had at the end of last summer, we knew that a lot of the main witnesses had been tied up with the Netflix documentary. And the Netflix documentary had them sign a contract where they couldn't film with anybody else. And so it was a real issue. All they wanted was to get balance, was to get the other side out. And that's all I tried to help them find, was to get balance. I didn't expect them to do certainly didn't think they would ever do an anti-Karen documentary, and they didn't. It's not. Just to get as much balance as we could in there. And the best that I could think of was that John has some friends that it had turned out, and I didn't meet John Jackson until during the trial, but he has a few friends that were really, really good friends, really articulate, really smart, and people that come across good on camera, and that wanted to, after the failure of the first trial, wanted to get more involved, to get in John's side up. So the first time that I filmed with the Unsolved people was before the trial, and I did not know that they had been filming with Karen. I didn't know who they'd been filming with. I didn't even actually know it was Unsolved Mysteries. The only thing I ever asked is, like I ask anybody, I'm doing a podcast Saturday that's a much smaller one. But all I ever ask is that, do you have integrity? Will you cover this to try, as objectively, we are trying to get to the truth and you're putting truth above views? That's all I ever ask. I don't tell people what to think. And, but I found out after the trial that they had filmed with Karen. And I was a little annoyed about it because they didn't tell me. And I felt like they should have told me that they were not only filming with Karen, but they were kind of the Karen documentary. They were pretty much selected by Alan Jackson or somebody on the defense team to do this. And I felt I should have known that, I don't know, but I can understand from their point of view why they wouldn't want to do that too. So I'm not trying to be overly critical of it. But anyways, I decided that, but once I got to know them and I got a sense that they were people of integrity, this was after I had worked with them the second time, I said it would be a good thing for them to get these friends of John's on their documentary. So I reached out to them, but they were super skeptical because, they don't want to be in a Karen documentary. These are John's friends, right? They did not want to be in a Karen documentary. I haven't talked to them since, so I'm not sure how they feel about how the results came out. Hopefully they're okay with it. But so what I basically kind of brokered was, I said, look, if we can get them to commit to try to get this out before the trial, maybe there'd be a little balance. not that it's an anti-Karen documentary, no, but just that the media has been just so one-sided. At least to the media, the big TV stations have been fair in that they're just kind of reporting the basic facts of the case. So they haven't been one-sided, but they don't really get into debunking the conspiracy theory area either. So in the areas where there's discussions of the case, it's been mostly on social media, other than the Howie Carr and maybe a few other more mainstream kind of podcasts. But it really puts a false impression, a narrative into the public. So I thought it would be better if they could get their story out and we could all get our story out and there'd be some balance. And so when I approached Unsolved and I said, I think these guys are willing to consider working with you as long as you can commit to trying to get this out before the second trial. That was the deal. And they had a meeting and decided, yes, we'll do everything we can to do that. And I think that's what they did. So, but I did have enough of a friendship with them over time to be able to have discussions. And I had discussions with a producer. I said, if you do come out before the trial, they're going to go after the prosecution. Presumably, is going to go after the material. What are you going to do? And she couldn't speak for the company, but she's like, we're obviously going to comply with every legal requirement. But I would think that any media any journalist like Gretchen Voss or like 2020 or any media company, they're also going to fight for media privilege. So they're going to make the state do everything they can to legally get this. So I don't know if there'll be time for that. They're not going to just surrender it. Lisa, thank you. They only used me for about 14 seconds, which is okay. But the more frustrating part is I debunked so much of the conspiracy, these plot points, and many of them were allowed to stand there. And I'm not knocking them. They got to do what they can to put this together. They were trying to capture. They weren't trying to do an analysis of the evidence. They were trying to capture the moment. But it was unfortunate they didn't use any of that. So Steph, I don't know. I don't know, Steph. Don't know if they'll get that. I mean, we're 2 weeks away from trial. Seems to me like a bit of a long shot. In fact, even if they were to get this material next week, there were like over 500 hours that I don't know how many total hours, but I think there was like 500 hours that they filmed just with Karen. So there's a lot of material to look through. And there's only a little more than 100 hours. How many hours are there in a week? 24 times 7, right? So less than 150 hours in a week. So, it's going to be hard to get to view that and get that all together. And I see our YCT attorney, Heather, is here. Good. So she can give us a little legal expertise on this stuff. Let's see. Let's go to questions. Let's just, since it's already 10:30, man, there's a couple more excellent articles by anonymous mass lawyer, but it's late. I don't want to read anymore. And you guys, it's a chance for you guys to ask questions. And there was so much other stuff that came up at the hearing yesterday that I'm forgetting about or didn't have time to go into. So thank you, Joe, for being here. And for people saying, we need to have a get together. Oh, somebody said you need to do a book signing or something like that. So the name of the book is still not up they had an article about it on their website, but they still have not put it up for pre-order yet, which is, I don't get it. It's stunning to me. That should be up the pre-order should be up 60 days before the book is published, because you want to get those pre-sales, because that's what drives the number. You get all these people that were watching this documentary around the world. Some of them might have been looking up to see if there were any books on Karen Read, but there are no books on Karen Read, and you couldn't pre-order mine because it's still not up there, which is crazy. So, I mean, it's just been a very difficult process. So, but in any case, it is supposedly still going to come out April 1st, and it's called Storm of Suspicion. I don't know about signings and stuff like that. That feels a little weird for me, but I would like no pre-order. But see, Ashley, the thing about the pre-orders is you want to hit that algorithm as hard as you can. So when it becomes available on April 1st, it jumps up right to the somewhere on the algorithm detects it so that people will say this book is hot. It might now, depending on how much book sales you get, that might only do that for an hour, or it might do. Oh, okay, Ashley, or it might do it for 5 hours, or if it's a really big book, might do it for a couple of days. So, unfortunately, I don't know. It is what it is. I can't do anything about it. So, yes, it will be on audio on Audible. They got a very good narrator to do it. If they wanted to save money, they could have had me do it, but you guys will get to hear a professional voice, not mine. Ashley, don't worry about it. I did miss part of the comment, so that's okay. That is a problem with chat. You can see part of a comment or you're not seeing the chain of comments that are going on. Karen 821 says, "Can you look at my chat and let me know what you think regarding the text?" There's no way for me to just. You're gonna have to ask it again. I don't know what. There's no way for me to like screen and get through all just your chats. That would be cool if there's a feature on that. If there is a feature, maybe my technology is behind and I don't know how to do it. So Caroline, sweet in Canada, always generous. Thank you very much, Caroline. I appreciate your support in all ways. And so Artworks said, Kevin, have you thought about the that hard. So he was the one that asked that a possibility of having a book signing event. I don't know about a book signing event, but we would like to do an event to just get together, right, and have drinks. The problem is that everybody's going to have unless it's absolutely kept secret, and there's no way to do it unless it's a really small group. They're going to take pictures and they're going to post it on social media, and I don't mind that, but most of the people here don't want that. So here's Karen's question, Kevin. Does opening the door into witness intimidation help the state's case because they can prove it directly now with the text? Did you review the motion and I missed it? Thanks for all you do. Okay, Karen, good question. So let me talk about this again. I have given a lot of thought about this. And so let's also include in this discussion the fact that Hank is applying for getting this material in. For instance, this is why he was in court yesterday morning in the Turtleboy case to try to get those communications that he wants to be able to show the jury that Karen Reed's direct participation in the intimidation of the witnesses is a basis for saying consciousness of guilt. Now, that's a little dubious to me. I don't think let me be clear. I'm glad he's doing it. I think he should do it. But I don't think it necessarily is consciousness of guilt because Karen could be doing that same thing even if she was innocent, right? She's going after these people. So I don't think it necessarily indicates consciousness of guilt. And I'm going to bet that probably Hank doesn't think that either. I think that Hank is just looking for an angle to get this into the hearing. So we saw a discussion about this yesterday. Alan Jackson said, I really didn't he basically told the judge, I did not open the door to this in the first trial. You basically forced that door open is what he said to her because you wanted it in there. And I don't think he's wrong. I think the judge was looking for a way to get it in. But it feels like it's an important part of justice in this case for the jury to understand what this defendant has done to these innocent people. And so one of the things that I've talked about, I think I talked about this yesterday on the channel, maybe I didn't, but jury nullification happens in different ways. It can be if people come into the case with their minds made up, or there could be ideological reasons or race-based reasons or things like that. But there's other reasons for it too. So I have talked to people, at least two, that follow the case that believe the conspiracy theory is complete bullshit. And believe that Karen is probably guilty. However, they have told me that if they were on the jury, that they would possibly not be willing to vote guilty because they don't think Karen should go to jail for a long time. Now, that is not the way a juror is supposed to do their duty. A juror is supposed to be a finder of fact. So they determine what the facts are in the case, and then it's the judge that imposes the sentence. The jury's not supposed to consider that. But as a practical matter, they're going to. It shouldn't be that way, but they're going to. So if Karen Reed was a gangbanger, a gangster involved in the mafia and all kinds of crimes and stuff like that, they're going to have that would make it easier for them if the evidence is there, like it is here, to convict her. But if Karen, even if they become convinced that she did the crime, but some jurors might decide, here's a person who didn't commit any crimes before this. She's in her 40s. She teaches college classes. We don't want to ruin this person's life by sending her away for 15 years. I think that's a risk here, that you're going to have jurors that think that way. And I'm not talking, and the people that have told me this are intelligent people too. So it's just, you can't separate that emotional aspect of it. And one is a guy and one is a woman who has told me this. So, but I think, so this is where it's important to get in some of this stuff that shows what Karen really is and what she's been up to on this case. Like even it's man, if they could ever just get in that clip from yesterday, from the documentary that shows, I think somebody sent me this clip. Let me see it. Oh, and I got the jury questionnaire too. I should go over that. I think I saved this somewhere. Let me check my emails too. Does anybody have the clip where Karen is shown the video of Allie McCabe's testimony where she starts crying on the stand, and Karen's reaction is basically, I don't feel anything because these people aren't just witnesses. They should have been treated as suspects. So that's a powerful clip. So, I wish the jury could see that. That would be powerful for the jury to see. Look, I don't care. So it was kind of interesting too, because that's why I titled the video yesterday, Vile. So Alan Jackson says in court, I think this was Tuesday, that the actions of Turtleboy, he doesn't name Turtleboy, are vile. He said it he used the word vile like 2 or 3 times. He's saying that those actions to intimidate these witnesses are vile. But we got nothing to do with it. That's got nothing to do with defendant. But then you see on the documentary just a few hours later, Karen saying, I don't find, and I'm paraphrasing here. She's saying none of this was vile to me because they're suspects. So I basically condone the way they're being treated. It was just a powerful thing to see Alan Jackson say that in the morning and then later see Karen on the documentary. Of course, it was recorded earlier, but see that after. Obviously, Karen thrilled at the targeting of these witnesses. And I think it's important if you can find a way for a jury to know that. That's really important. Andy asks, Kevin, do you think Alan Jackson knew that Terry would be asking questions of the other side when they started this? I have no idea. And it sounds, though, from just watching Terry in the interviews, in my time with her, I didn't ask any question like that. But it sounds like, strangely, they didn't put any restrictions on her. They said you got full access, and for the most part, unless we tell you something within a couple of days, we don't want you to use this. They're able to use any of it. All right, so let me go to this one here. Let's see if I can make this bigger. All right. This is so Jen sent me this, and True Crime Junkie, you see here, one of our regulars and friend of the channel. What she sent, I don't know where she got it. She said is the current jury questionnaire. Now, I don't know because is this a proposed questionnaire? Because they haven't completed the questionnaire, is my understanding, right? That's something still to be discussed, but maybe this is a proposed, and I don't know which side. Of course, I have somewhere the jury questionnaire that they used last time. I've gone over it on the channel, but it's been a while, and I don't store things properly. So let's just go over the one here. Question number 1, if this is the jury questionnaire or a proposed version of it. It is alleged that on January 29th, while intoxicated and operating her motor vehicle, that the defendant, Karen, killed the boyfriend, John O'Keefe. Is there anything about the description of the case, the charges, or that the victim was an off-duty police officer that causes you to believe that you cannot be fair and impartial in this case? Have you already started to make up your mind about this case? So that's an interesting way of wording it. Have you already, so they don't say, have you already made up? It says, have you already started to make up your mind about this case? So they're assuming that this person knows something about the case. Do you have opinions regarding previous experiences as a juror, the fairness of the jury system, or criminal justice cases system in our country that would impair your ability to be fair? Do you have any religious or philosophical beliefs that would interfere? Do you have any religious the case is I'm going to skip over some of the questions that don't seem that interesting. The case is expected to garner a significant amount of media attention. Is there anything about the high-profile nature of this case that would prevent you from serving as a fair and impartial juror? So, that's a fair question because some people would have a lot of anxiety about not wanting to be involved. There's already anxiety for serving in a murder case, but for most jurors. But then now you add to that having to deal with this kind of sensation, do you or any family members or close friends reside in or conduct regular business in Canton? Would you automatically believe or disbelieve law enforcement officers, firefighters, or first responders simply because of their occupation? Do you have any strong personal beliefs, or have you been exposed to any strong personal beliefs from friends and relatives about law enforcement officers, prosecutors, or the government? Well, I think everybody probably has. That seems like a stupid question to me because what person doesn't have that? Everybody has someone in their family that has some kind of an opinion about cops or prosecutors or the government. That question is just too broad. Have you ever been involved in a group, community, or individual activity showing support for law enforcement in or outside your community? So this is a defense-oriented question. They want to find out. So yeah, if you're one of those back the blue kind of people, then that's an important thing for you. You might not be fair. All right. So thank you, Kim. We got the video from Allie's reaction. From Allie and Karen's reaction to watching it. So we'll show that in a second. Have you ever been involved in a group, community, or individual activity that was critical of the police, law enforcement, or outside your own community? Have you or someone close to you ever had education, training, or work experience in any of the following fields: law enforcement, military, alcohol, drug abuse, domestic violence? Do you have any strong personal beliefs, or have you been exposed to any strong personal beliefs from friends and relatives about operating a vehicle while drunk? Have you ever been involved in a group, organization, participated in a march, demonstration, campaign, or donated money on behalf of an organization or cause that was against driving under the influence of alcohol? All right, let's skip the drunk questions. I really only care about the questions particular to this case. During trial, you will hear testimony about medical treatment, death, or review graphic autopsy photographs. Will that affect your ability to participate? You may find a defendant guilty on circumstantial evidence, but you cannot find a defendant guilty based on speculation, guesswork, or surmise. Is it difficult for you to understand the difference? Do you know or recognize anyone you have seen today in the courthouse or in the jury pool? I mean, they may recognize the judge. Would your answer to any of the above questions be embarrassing or damaging if disclosed publicly? All right. So, and then here's another, I don't know if this is a supplement, but do you have any knowledge of this case gained from any source? What is your source of knowledge? TV, radio, newspapers, magazines, internet, Twitter, Yellow Cottage Tales. Oh, just kidding. Social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, other podcast, family, friends, observations in the community, overheard discussions. What are the details of the case that you are able to recall? Wow, they really have some specific questions here. I don't remember anything like this on the last jury questionnaire, so I don't know. I don't know if these will make it through. What is your primary source of news and information? How often do you read print or online newspapers, magazines, blogs, and what sources? How often are you exposed to news from radio, TV, podcasts, social media, and Yellow Cottage Tales? What is your familiarity with the case prior to today? Have you had discussions about this case prior to today? Is there any reason you would be unable to follow an instruction that during your jury? All right, this is an important one. Is there any reason that you would be unable to follow an instruction that during your jury service you may not read any news or media accounts about this case, watch or listen to any media or news broadcasts or commentary about this case, discuss this case with anyone, research or look this case up on the internet, or perform independent research? So we know that the dismissed juror definitely violated this. We have reason to believe possibly the alternate juror did too, but that's highly speculative, though. We don't really know too much about her, except that she showed up in court after being chosen as an alternate. She showed up in pink. So she obviously had developed an understanding that pink stood for Karen Reed and was bold enough or angry enough that she had become an alternate that she decided to show up. And that was a lawyer too, apparently. And she is in some kind of close contact with Turtleboy. There's no reason to think that contact existed before the case, but she is now. All right. Is there any reason you would be unable to follow an instruction that during your jury service you may not read or review any social media articles, posts, videos, podcasts, and other non-traditional media platforms? Is there any reason that if you are inadvertently exposed to extrajudicial influence or media about this case, that you would be unable to follow an instruction that you must report? So if you accidentally, I think there was, I don't know, it might have been Ronnie, but not in the interview with Turtleboy, but in the older interview with Turtleboy that Turtleboy just printed the results. I think Ronnie might have mentioned that he was still working during the trial as an EMT, and that if the news came on about the case, he had to leave the room. I'm not sure. Am I missing that? I seem to remember that. All right, so let's go to the video. And of course, this was on Kate's channel. I knew I saw it somewhere, and I knew I couldn't remember where. I had seen it earlier today on Kate's channel. So You'll be able to find this clip yourself at Masshole Mafia on Twitter. And again, go back to Kate's channel and watch the grifter video that she made today. That was really, really well done. And sorry, Kim. I'm going to get my headphones on again. All right. So this is pretty powerful. And I wish if there's ever a way that you could show this to a jury, I mean, just, the coldness of this person.
Failing my school. Just like a lot of harassment. Can I have a moment, please? Sure. It's impossible.
So, was she shown this clip in this moment? It seems like it, right? At least that's the way the editing makes it appear. And maybe that's unfair because maybe it wasn't that way. I don't know. But I did actually remember discussing this very moment, Allie's testimony, with Terry, the owner of Unsolved Mysteries. And it was something that really moved, that memory of this moment really moved Terry as well. And I don't want to talk too much about it, but I remember she was particularly disgusted by the way David Yannetti treated Allie.
Sure. It's impossible for me to have any sympathy for any of these witnesses. Definitionally, is it harassing witnesses? Yes, they're witnesses against me in my prosecution. And is he yelling things at them? And is he going up to their front doors and ringing the bell? Yes. But they shouldn't be witnesses. They should have been suspects. So it's not cut and dry.
Yeah, it's just pure evil. I don't know how to describe this.
Failing my school.
It's anything but pure. I mean, look at this. If that's the moment when she was shown that video, I mean, every time I see that video, I found myself getting a little watery-eyed. I don't like watching a young college kid crying like that and having her life destroyed for doing nothing wrong. I find that moving. I find it disturbing. And no matter how many times I will see a video like that, it makes me a little teary-eyed. But Karen is anything but. Look at her face there. And she was just shown this video. Look at this. There's not an ounce of human compassion there.
It's impossible for me to have any sympathy for any of these witnesses.
So it's impossible for her to have any sympathy for Allie McCabe, who her lawyers are falsely portraying the evidence of the Life 360 to make it seem like Allie is running all kinds of trips all around town in the moments when they believed that John was being murdered and that Allie was helped covering it up. You're ruining some kid's life just because you're not accountable for what you want to do and for what you did. And your lawyers, and you're willing to ruin a young kid's life just because you believe that all is fair and love and lawfare, that you're going to do everything at all costs to try to create your third party culprit, because that's the only way to even possibly portray Karen as innocent. It's disgusting. I don't really look. If the new evidence that Hank referred to yesterday from the chip-off data and from John's phone, if that is anywhere near as conclusive as it seems to be, then there's anybody who was in the circles of David Yannetti and Karen Reed, I don't know how you could ever shake their hand again. I don't know how you could ever look them in the eye again. For David Yannetti to know that Allie McCabe is innocent and yet do what he did. I'm sorry. There's no, I understand that you need to have you need to represent your client vigorously, but there are limitations. And destroying an innocent person is one of those limitations in anybody's book, in any ethical philosophy. And I have talked to lawyers, defense lawyers, that would say, no, they would not have done that. David Yannetti did. All right, and that's just one moment in this case, but it was a powerful moment. You know,
Definitionally, is it harassing witnesses? Yes, they're witnesses.
definitionally, is it harassing? She says yes.
Against me in my prosecution. And
But it's okay because they're against her. And that's how this woman looks at it. Okay? This is pure psychopathy. The psychopath looks at anybody that stands in their way as an obstacle that's worthy of destruction. That is textbook psychopathy.
is he yelling things at them? And is he going up to their front doors and ringing the bell? Yes. But
Is he? Who are you talking about, Karen? Who are you talking about? You're talking about Turtleboy, that same person who you were just smoozing with in court, shown earlier on the court TV video from this week. I mean, there's just not even look at the smile. I mean, there's not even a moment where you say, you know, I don't like any of this, but I'm fighting for my life and I believe there was a conspiracy. I mean, there's not even a moment of compassion. It's not part of her personality.
they shouldn't be witnesses. They should have been suspects.
It's just pure evil.
So it's not cut and dry. Knowing my school.
All right, guys. So I'm sorry if I'm sure seeing Allie brought to tears is very uncomfortable for everybody to watch. So I'm sorry to have to put you through it. And hopefully she won't have to testify in the next trial. But this is, again, let's go to another statement that I've made. If the feds got the geofence data from 34 Fairview, and that geofence data shows that Colin Albert was gone, and if they got the geofence data, that's what it'll show, and they don't release that to the parties, evil. It's pure evil. You can't hide behind some kind of a policy. It's pure evil. And so if we eventually learn that Josh Levy, the U.S. attorney at the time, got that geofence data and hid that, that's the word, hid that from the public, because they had the power to use that evidence to clear these people. They had the power. It's been done in other cases like the Brian Kohlberger case. They had the power to come out and have a press conference and say, listen, we're not getting involved in the Karen Reed trial, but we have evidence that Colin Albert was not in the house. So cross him off your list. If they had that evidence and didn't do it, evil is the only word that applies. If Josh Levy sat on that evidence, if anybody in that office sat on that evidence, it's evil, and no one should call it anything different. No one should hide behind any kind of a policy or perceived rule. We don't reveal that. No. You're hiding. You're hiding behind evil because you don't want to reveal something. It's because you selfishly don't want to reveal something that was embarrassing to yourself. Now, again, we don't know if the feds had that, but there's every reason to believe that they do. And if it ever comes out that the feds had that information and sat on it, then nobody should ever be willing to sit in the same restaurant with Josh Levy again. I'm sorry. There's no other way to say it. It's pure evil. It's pure evil to sit on that. I don't care how good the schools you went to and how you're a gentleman and maybe you hold the door for ladies and you pay your taxes and you donate to charities and you say all the right things. You're politically correct, blah, blah, blah. Great. That's what being a good person on the surface looks like. That's a veneer of being good. But being a good person is when you're tested to do something that might be a little bit uncomfortable for you, that might even be not in your interest, but you do it anyways because it's the right thing to do. If they didn't do that here, there needs to be serious accounting. The feds need to come clear on what they got. They need to come clear. I'm accusing them right now of saying that they got that geofence data. Look, on November of 2022, so less than a year after John's death, they put out subpoenas for the communications of all the people that the defense team said were the real killers. Now, that's stunning on itself, that a defense team gets to walk in to a U.S. attorney's office, tell you who the real killers are, and you go and you issue subpoenas for the communications of people that are not suspected of being a part of crime, of being involved in a crime. That's bad enough. But what I'm saying is that if they were that diligent, they're taking those kind of automatic steps that you do. It's they can subpoena that. They don't need probable cause just to subpoena those records. Eventually, later on, they would use probable cause in an affidavit to get the content of a lot of those messages. That was a little bit, but that early step of just subpoenaing the actual communications, they don't even need probable cause for that. It's routine to some degree, right? And so as part of that routine getting of information, getting data, you mean to tell me they didn't also get the geofence data? That's routine. They had to have got it. They had to have gotten it. And should that have been routine with the state police investigation? Maybe. But the state police had no reason to believe that John ever went in the house. So they really had no reason for getting the geofence data. But the feds were investigating the theory of whether John went in the house. So presumably, I'm going to bet that right at the same time that they subpoenaed those communications in November, that's the very time that they would have got that geofence data. So if they got that data, that data would exonerate Chris Albert, Colin Albert, Julie Albert for their testimony, would exonerate Allie McCabe, and really, in a lot of ways, everybody in the house. So if they didn't get that data, and I believe they did, if they got that data and they didn't release it, there is no excuse. It's one of the scummiest moves we've seen in legal history in a while. All right. Heather's question. This is Heather, otherwise known as the YCT legal department. Kevin, did they look at Karen's text to Yannetti? Kevin, did they not look at Karen's text to Yannetti? So what happened was they took Karen's phone that day, and she did not give him the password. So they had to use a device that cycles through all of the passwords, and they didn't get into the phone until August of 2022. So that machine took 8 months to get through to get the password. And once they got in it, that's when Proctor starts going through it. There are some insensitive texts as a result of that. But he quickly, probably that day, comes upon an attorney-client privilege message, stops, immediately takes the phone, closes it up, and sends it off to the taint team at the Attorney General's office in Boston. This is probably pretty standard stuff where you look through a phone and you see attorney-client privilege, like, oh, we got to stop. This goes to the taint team. So we don't know what texts they look through at that point. But then after the taint team is done, the attorney-client privilege texts are redacted, and then the rest goes back to the state for them to look through. Oh, bossy chick. Oh, well, she's we don't get to say goodnight and tuck her in because she said goodnight. She says, goodnight, Kevin. Well, thank you, bossy. Bossy Texas chick. Thanks so much. Your chats make an otherwise intolerable situation tolerable. So, of course, the chats are run by Joe and Thomas Fleming. So that $5 should go to them. And I don't know. We'll have to do at some point this summer a dinner. I did have a dinner that Tom was at last year related to some of the people involved in this. And Joe is coming from a lot further away, though. So I can't afford to fly Joe here. If we could figure out a way to do that. But Joe is coming from pretty far away. She's making a sacrifice to stay up now if she's still with us to keep moderating this because she's in a very different time zone. And she is still with us. So thank you for being with us, Joe. I won't ask what time it is where you are because that might give away your location a little bit. But oh, Ken, I never knew you were from Oregon. Ken Weeks is from Oregon. You've been a regular here so long, and I just assumed you were Massachusetts. And Weeks is a very common Massachusetts name. Jen McCabe's name is Weeks, her maiden name. So No Strays asks, how do Karen Reed's lawyers reconcile John O'Keefe getting into a fight to the death with 3 grown men and a dog without any of their DNA being this? It's a good question, and the thing is they don't ask. People in the Free Karen Reed movement never ask questions like this. They don't. They live in this kind of mental void sometimes. But see, all right, so D-Devs says the text messages disqualify Proctor, but what? What does disqualify mean? See, the thing is none of the evidence really here. You don't need you could take all the evidence that Michael Proctor gathered on this case and say, let's dismiss that evidence because we don't know. We suspect Michael Proctor. Now, keep in mind, the feds dug and the Mass State Police dug hard into Michael Proctor's background. And they found no evidence of wrongdoing in any other case, no evidence of corruption, no evidence of planting evidence. So, but maybe you somehow believe that Michael Proctor was part of a cover-up of planting evidence in the Karen Reed case, but avoided saying it in the texts on his phones, even though it wouldn't be because he was being clever, because he wasn't careful with his phones. As you can see, he said things that he never, on his private phone, that he never thought anybody would get. So it seems to me that if he was planting evidence or part of a conspiracy, he would have used that same phone. He wasn't trying to hide anything there. But here's the thing. If you want to take away any of the evidence that the state is using because it was gathered by Michael Proctor, go ahead. Get rid of it. The fundamental evidence that convicts Karen Reed has nothing to do with Michael Proctor. So the most important evidence is the fact that the taillight pieces that were found in a debris pattern around where John's body was found. That has nothing to do with Michael Proctor. Michael Proctor was not at the crime scene that day. That evidence was gathered by the CERT team. Now, eventually, as the snow melted, some pieces of evidence were gathered or documented by Michael Proctor. If you want to eliminate those pieces, have at it. Doesn't matter to me. The fundamental pieces that were found by the CERT team were found that day, and there was no time to plant them. All right? The vehicle data was not gathered, was not something that Michael Proctor would have any idea how to do. And there's no, drop the pen, I don't want to step on it. There is no questioning of the integrity of Joe Paul, Trooper Joe Paul. This guy is a hero who fought for his country. He's a quiet, unassuming guy, and he's just doing his job. There's no reason to question his integrity. There's no reason to even think that it was possible for him to somehow manufacture or invent the vehicle data. So that vehicle data Stays in the evidence. It's got nothing. It couldn't have been manufactured, and it's got nothing to do with Michael Proctor. What else do we have? We got John's phone data. Now, John's phone data, when you correlate that with the vehicle data, shows exactly what time exactly what time the Lexus struck a pedestrian-sized object. But in addition, that GPS data shows that John never went inside the house. So there's your fundamental data, your fundamental evidence right there, and none of it has anything to do with Michael Proctor. Okay? If you want to eliminate John's clothing, in which was found microscopic taillight pieces, go ahead. Don't need it. It's not important. So if you think somehow Michael Proctor carries around a little jar of taillight dust and he sprinkles it on crimes when he has to, okay, you're welcome to have that belief. Fine. Don't use that evidence. We got enough evidence without that. You also have Karen's statements at the crime scene. That has nothing to do with Proctor. You have, now, as you know, for me, the statements at the crime scene are not that big for me because we don't know exactly what was in her head when she said them. But what is big for me is the statements that she made to Carrie Roberts when she called up and said, John's dead at 5 a.m., slammed the phone, and then called back and said, maybe he's been hit by a plow. And those statements are corroborated by the fact that Carrie then hung up and called the police and then the hospital to see if anybody injured had turned up. Proctor had nothing to do with that evidence. So for someone to sit here and say, Proctor showed bias, therefore this case has to be dismissed, you're an idiot. You're an idiot. You're not thinking clear. You're not thinking clear. I'm sorry if it's late at night and I'm being mean, but that's like brother counsel type thinking, where if you find some doubt about some piece of evidence, that's enough to go with, that's reasonable doubt for everything. Let's stop looking at everything else. That's insane. That's insane. So there is no evidence at all that Proctor lied, manufactured, planted evidence. But if you believe that he potentially was part of a conspiracy because his sister knew Chris Albert's wife or something like that, and you want to get rid of all the evidence that Proctor collected, go ahead. Have at it. I don't care. It doesn't affect this case. It doesn't affect the prosecution's case at all. So go ahead. Feel free. I mean, you're losing the argument very bad, D-Dev, you know? I mean, I don't know what to tell you, brother. Is it your position that you want to ignore all the evidence that wasn't collected by Trooper Proctor? Or are you going to go with the position that everybody's in on it? The CERT team is in on it. And that's how the piece was faulted. The pieces were planted. Are you going to go with the idea that Trooper Paul and Trooper Garino manufactured the data and the GPS? Are you going to go with that? Are you going to go with the idea that Kerry Roberts invented Karen's phone call? Is that what you're going to do, brother? I mean, I don't know what to tell you, man. You're not in the right place picking a fight. If you think you're going to win an argument against me, I don't think you're going to win it against me on anything, but you're definitely not going to win it on this case. So I appreciate that you're here watching, because that's something that a lot of people, most people on the Free Karen Read side don't seek out evidence from the other side. So they live in a bubble and an information bubble. And so at least you're here listening. So you hear the other side. Now, I don't know how closely you're actually listening, but this evidence is bulletproof. It's not evidence I made up, and it's not evidence that could have been manufactured, and it has nothing to do with Michael Proctor. Period. I also I won't address his name, but someone who's Free Karen Read who messages me a lot on Facebook, and it's mostly a polite civil conversation. His name is Steve. Let's just go with Steve. And but he gets on me mostly because I'm not trying to destroy Michael Proctor. It's just I'm not covering the Michael Proctor case. I'm covering the Karen Reed case. And there's no evidence that Michael Proctor did planted evidence in the Karen Reed case. And so he's saying that Michael Proctor didn't tell his supervisors about his connection to the Alberts. And I told him in my reply, no, he did. He testified that he told Yuri Buchanan that when they first arrived at the Canton police. But even if you question that he said that he told Yuri that, because he testified to that and Yuri testified to that. But if you want to think that both of these troopers are lying, well, remember this. That's the reason that the Canton police were conflicted out of being part of the investigation, because Michael Proctor revealed the connection. It's also because Kevin Albert worked for the Canton police and the crime happened at 34 Fairview. And then he just repeated in his next message to me that he obviously didn't read my message. He said, yeah, and Michael Proctor didn't reveal it to his supervisors. Like, you're wasting my time if I explain to you something happened and then you just repeat it again later as though I didn't say it. It's like, man, I get a lot of messages and I don't want people to waste my time, I mean, DDev, I don't make up any evidence. If you've watched this channel, you know that. I give you evidence. I talk about evidence that's established. On the rare times when I get something wrong on a piece of evidence, somebody corrects me and then I correct it. So the evidence here is bulletproof. Now, is the evidence for second degree bulletproof? No. No, in my opinion, no. Let's been on for a few hours, so let's end on that. Let's take a few minutes on this. And so what is my theory of the case based on the evidence? What do I think happened? And I don't want to, as much as possible, you're going to have to do this, have to be willing to speculate a little bit, but you want to avoid as much speculation as possible. So, for example, we don't know if Karen, we could look at all right, so looking at the fact that the Lexus, the alarm system worked and the sensors worked, from that alone, we cannot establish that the sensors detected John and that the alarms went off and that Karen heard them. We don't know. But there is some other evidence we can look at. So, first of all, this isn't evidence, but it's unusual that lately Karen is always saying in these interviews or going back over time, she's always emphasizing how she likes to listen to loud music in the car. Why is she telling us this? Why was Karen why is she always saying, I listen to loud music in the car? Whether or not it's true that she listens to loud music is irrelevant. What I'm saying is why does she feel the need to bring this up? Well, the only reason is because she's trying to suggest that if she struck John, she didn't hear it. And that's something that could be important for, even if she is convicted, she wants to be able to explain to her friends and family, hey, I didn't mean to fool you guys with all this. I believed I was innocent and I never heard anything. She doesn't want people to know that she might have heard that she was in an accident. But we don't know for sure. We can't really know at all whether those sensors, well, maybe in the new chip-off data, we may get that. So the new new data may show, but nothing's been mentioned about that in court. So at this point, we don't know it. But in theory, the new chip-off data might pick this up. But at this point, we don't know. But for me, what's revealing is the deleted Ring videos. Now, unfortunately, we don't know exactly which ones were deleted, and we have no idea who deleted them, when they were deleted. That sucks. I mean, if we could know that, that would make a huge difference in this case. Really, that would make a huge difference in trying to prove second degree. But let's look at what videos are missing. Now, we only know of 3 because we know these events happened, but they weren't captured in the videos. So the first one is Karen getting home at 12:36. The second one is Karen pulling into the garage at 12:41. And the third one is Karen and Jen and Kerry leaving at about 5:45. There's a clear video of them arriving, but the video of them leaving has been deleted. Really weird, right? Let's for the sake of argument assume that both the state police and Karen could theoretically have deleted these videos. The state police had access to John's phone, and Karen, if she had access to John's password, could have done it from any computer. She could have deleted them. Just log in and delete them. So, to be fair and objective, let's just say either thing is possible. Now, it's hard to imagine what the troopers would gain from deleting a video of Karen getting home. Right? I can't imagine why they would delete it. So when Karen pulled in, you don't see her taillight because she pulled in frontways. So the video of Karen pulling up at 12:36, unless she did something weird in the parking lot where she was driving around, there's not going to be any image of the taillight. So what would be the point of the conspirators wanting to delete that? I can't think of any. Well, why would Karen potentially want to delete it? Well, let's come back to that. The third video that we know is missing, as I said, is the one where Karen, Jen, and Kerry leave. Now we know, and we know this now also from Karen's testimony. So Jen and Kerry described on the stand Karen showing them her broken taillight. But we now know that we're going to hear that Karen also described that to Boston Magazine reporter Gretchen Voss. And Hank Brennan has the transcript and he has the audio. He has read some of the transcript showing Karen's vivid description of plucking a taillight piece out, dropping it in the driveway. That video is missing. Well, we can understand why Karen might want to delete that video, right? Because it shows her looking at the broken taillight. So it would make sense why she might not want that in there, right? So let's go back to 12:36 when she gets there. At 12:37, Karen calls John and leaves the first voicemail. What does she say in that voicemail? John, I fucking hate you. That's what she says in the voicemail. Now, we can't know what she meant or what caused the anger. It could have been as simple as, had there been no accident, had John still been alive, it could have been she's mad because John went to the party. Right? We can't know. But you have to combine the different things we do know. We do know that somebody deleted the video of Karen showing her broken taillight to Kerry and Jen. That's one of the videos missing. Then we go back to 12:36, 12:37, and we know that video's missing, and we know Karen's angry. So what has always made the most sense to me is that Karen pulled into the driveway, didn't have a garage opener, so she has to go into the house to open it from the inside. But before she did, she walked around back and looked at her taillight. And that's the moment where she got pissed and said, John, I fucking hate you. Now, I would guess that at that moment, she either didn't know that she struck John, but she knew she struck something, or she didn't know that she struck John hard enough to hurt him badly. But that does tell us that she knew, if she did look at that taillight, and she must have, why else delete that video? That tells us that she knew she had struck something. Okay? Now, my guess is that she didn't know that she struck John at that time. She knew she struck something. And in drunkenness and anger, she didn't know if she had a mailbox or whatever. But she knew she struck something because that's why she got out of the car to look at the taillight. And that's probably why she was mad, because she was blaming John for the damage to the taillight. So I don't know if there are 16 missing events, Maureen. That didn't come across on the stand, so I don't know. I don't know about that. So it'll be interesting to see. So I believe that at that point, she knew she hit something. She may not have known it was John. And based on the voicemails, pretty good chance that she didn't. However, she knew she hit something enough to do damage to her car. And then she does take a nap, wakes up around 4:30, and maybe a little less drunk now. Things are starting to come together in her head. And she says, what the hell happened to my car? Now, at that point, the car was in the garage. So she walks out to the garage and looks at her taillight. And now she puts it, and then she calls John. He doesn't answer the phone. And now, for the first time, remember, she's pretty drunk. First time she puts it together. Oh my God, it was John that I hit. And that's why he didn't come home. And I believe that that's probably what happened. That's my, you don't have to, listen, this is a complicated set of evidence, and everybody is entitled to their own interpretation of that evidence. I'm not trying to quarrel with someone who has a different view. I don't know. And, I'm still open to different theories, but that is the best way to make sense of the facts to me. The video of 12:41 of her pulling into the garage. Well, again, she probably looked at the taillight, left a message to John, went into the house, went to the bathroom, went into the garage and opened the door, and then moved her car in. But I'm going to guess that she probably looked at her taillight again. That would have been around 12:40. And which shows she's really trying to process, what did I hit? But this is where the second degree comes in too. So even whether she put it together in that moment or put it together at 4:30, she did put it together before she returned to the crime scene. And she never called 911. So, had she called 911 at 4:30, could John have been saved? I don't know. But we know that paramedic Flamati told Trooper Proctor, when Trooper Proctor was first woken up about this crime at like 6:45 or so, or I think it was like 6:45, and he's getting the overview from the paramedics. I think it was actually Lank that told him that the paramedics said that John had a 10% chance of surviving. And I don't know, maybe now a medical examiner might say that it was even less than that, but at the time, let's just go with that number for the moment. That at 6:15 when John was rescued, that he had a 10% chance. I think it probably was less than that, but let's just say he had a 10% chance of surviving. What was the chance if he had been picked up at 5 an hour earlier? So I think people have said here that your body temperature drops 2 degrees an hour. Is that if I remember that correct? So if that's the case, then John's body temperature would have, instead of being 81, would have been 83. What time did his heart stop beating? What time did he stop breathing? We don't know. But an hour earlier rescue, maybe he's, instead of having a 10% chance of survival, maybe he's got a 20% chance. But that, I can tell you, someone that looks at those kind of survival odds from a personal situation, I much prefer going with 20% than 10%. Much prefer. So if somebody tells me I've got to go through a certain treatment and it's going to increase my chances of survival for the next year from 10% to 20%, I'm going to take it. you know? So this is where second degree comes in. Karen could have called 911, and she should have called 911 as soon as she put it together. So whether that was at 1 or at 4:30, she needed to call 911, and she never did that. That would be second degree. All right, guys, have a very good weekend. Thank you. Let me just get to Tulu's comment. Did you see Kate's video today? She showed how once hire and pay actors in so many situations. Do you believe this may be true with pink pom-poms? So I watched the first half of the video and showed it to everybody here. I didn't want to go all the way to the end because I didn't want Kate worked so hard on that video. I don't want to pilfer her content. So for anybody here, go to Masshole Mafia to watch Kate's outstanding video. I think it's only like 15 minutes long, and I showed the first half of it here. So please go to Masshole Mafia and watch Kate's video. And so for everybody else, saying goodnight and saying have a good weekend. Same to you. Please have a good weekend. Hopefully today was cold and windy. Hopefully we'll get some more spring-like weather coming back. There is a hearing next Tuesday. I'm not sure if I'll be on before then. Who knows? Seems like there's always something new developing in this case, but probably we'll have the weekend off. So I will let you know as soon as the book is available for pre-order, and you guys can help us out, support it. And thank you, Victoria. So you guys are like family. So very much appreciate seeing you, and thanks for being here.